you happy with better
Yeah,
beer?
yeah.
We've got VBs out the back, or we've got Reckless. What would you prefer?
No, better beer's good.
Yeah, locale, mate.
Yeah.
Summer's coming up.
Get the bod out.
That's it.
Oh no! He's in the fence! The boat's in the fence! They're all in the fence! Oh, unbelievable!
Sound check.
Sound check. There we go. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Cheers, boys.
Thanks
Coming
for,
in.
thanks for having me.
We back for episode 26. Flying by. You say that every time. It does feel like they're ticking over fast. I can't believe we've made it this far already, but we do always forget. But if you can, hit subscribe, like, all that jazz to keep us going. And I want to give a shout out to our partners quickly as well, because they do keep us alive, as well as Patreon. It's something new that we've started, so I want to give a thank you to the fans that have jumped on board and supported us already. One thing we've talked about on the show between Elliot and I is that we want to be able to sort of choose the partners we work with, and the sponsors we've got on board so far are really supportive of what we're doing. But the support you guys are giving us well through Patreon helps us stay independent. We are definitely not controlled by anyone. So we want to stay that way. But yeah, if you're going away, it's Christmas time, holiday season, East Coast Car Rentals, AHU15 for that 15% off on your already well-priced rental car. So East Coast Car Rentals for those for those needs. Trico Products, AU, if you can, support them as well. Big supporters of the show. And Lancaster Motor Group. If you're looking for a car, they're your team for anything in the need. We've got something for you to buy or rent.
Correct.
Got you sorted.
Cover all angles here.
We've got a massive guest on the show today. I'm very stoked to introduce him. Of course, Supercars legend. Don't need to write that one down. We all know that. Multiple race winner, but the thing that blows me away is in those races in his Supercars Championship, there's 5 Bathurst wins, which coming from a guy who's tried it already a lot of times, it is a fucking hard race to win. So to win it 5 times, I'm extremely impressed with. And to win it back-to-back in those years as well and have multiple on the podium with his dad is something for me I think is so special. To have done it with not just a family member, but your dad is very special. So welcome to the show, Steve Richards.
Thanks,
Appreciate you
guys.
coming on.
I've been watching your stuff. It's been entertaining viewing, divisive sometimes, I'm sure, for you guys, but you're putting out a great message. I like it.
Well, it's Elliot normally that's the divisive one. I'm kind of I'm the peacekeeper on the show.
You know that, Richo. I'm real abrasive.
I feel like Richo's watched enough shows already. Like now he knows that's probably not the case. But yeah, honestly, like the Bathurst stats, we were in a car once in Sydney, and I said this to Elliot before when I was like, I reached out to you to come on. I said, we were going to Sydney. We'd landed in Sydney and we were driving to an appearance in a cab, and we were talking about Bathurst stats. And I said, like, I was happy with mine, and I thought, just because I hadn't won it or anything, but I was like, I'd had mechanicals and DNFs and stuff. But when I finished, we were talking about stats of people that have done well.
Yep.
I remember I was saying that I had finished well when I'd finished, like it was like top 8 or something at that point of however many starts. And then you started telling me yours, and I was just like, holy shit. Like you had the one DNF in 96.
Yep.
But I think 95 was your debut. You finished 4th.
Yep.
96, the DNF, but you were paired with your dad in that. Then 97, you finished runner-up. 98, 99, you win it back-to-back.
I just thought you had to turn up and you'd get a podium.
That's probably how Percat felt at the start.
Well, actually, yeah, he had not a bad run initially, didn't he?
Yeah.
But mind you, there was a big spate of not much in terms of results for a while there. But yeah, it's the old cliche, and it's real. Good teams, good drivers, opportunity. You take a punt. Certain times of the race where but had reliable cars too. Like back in the mid to late 90s, they were still really developing things. Like I remember the old man had a tail shaft brake in 95, actually my first one.
Right.
They were leading the race, tail shaft brake. So there's still a fair few elements of the rules were flexible enough that you could do things on the cars to make a difference. Had a pretty tight rule set, but you could actually go and do different things. You could have different brakes. I mean, one stage there, we tried a twin caliper on the front axle, because that's what all the super tourers were doing.
Yeah, right.
And we're involved with that. So you're allowed to do all that sort of stuff. I guess that.
Sorry to jump in. Was that when you had a rotor fail? I watched this. You had a front brake rotor fail. Were you trying the twin caliper then? Because I remember an interview with you.
Yeah, wasn't that?
Was you saying it was harder to change the caliper?
So no. So that was at Sydney at Eastern Creek. I had a pretty big crash in the Ford.
No, I thought it was Bathurst.
I had a rotor fail at Bathurst, but not in a supercar. I had it fail in the Super Tourer race.
Oh,
in '97. yeah, thankfully it sort of failed at the bottom of the hump, and there's still enough rear brake to sort of slow it down before the chase,
Right.
and yeah, it was pretty scary.
Do you reckon what you just touched on then, Richo, with making the car last and things like that? Because what are you by trade? Are you a
Aircraft mechanic.
aircraft mechanic?
Yeah.
But you've obviously, I mean, I've seen you work on bikes and cars before. You're obviously really handy. Do you reckon that played a part in?
Yeah, maybe. I do remember early on when I was driving, I used to pay particular, and later in my career, you didn't pay any attention to temperatures and things like that, unless you had you had a hit with someone and you're monitoring coolant temperature or something. But yeah, early on I used to a lot, and I used to try and when I could, if you had a gap or you weren't chasing someone down or you're a part of the race where you were just trying to manage to get to the next point. Yeah, I do remember sort of trying to be easier, use the clutch occasionally on the up. Not that would have made any difference, but just the thought to try different things when you're in the car to make it a bit easier. I don't know.
A little bit of mechanical sympathy.
Maybe, but they were at a point even back then, probably the mid-90s, like I said, there were still elements where things could go wrong, but geez, they become bulletproof pretty quick. Yeah, you didn't have to do too many things wrong. As long as you were replacing components regularly, you could pretty well drive them pretty hard.
It was surprising to see the difference when I was looking back today at all the numbers, the qualifying and top 10 shootout. Some of the gaps were massive.
Yeah, they were.
And it was a race that, because we've talked about now where everything's so good, everyone, the cars, the teams, even the guys at the back, we had a good chat about the rebuilds they were doing in Adelaide.
Yep.
And we can all say that there's good teams and not so good teams. But the fact that every single person in the pit lane can repair a car the way they do shows that the ones we're saying aren't a Tickford or a T8 or whatever, you could take mechanics out of those teams and put them in those in the top teams.
Absolutely.
They're all so good at what they do.
Yeah.
But that's what makes Bathurst, unfortunately, not as exciting as it used to be, because even some of the years you had won weren't in the shootout.
No, that's
and
right.
you've got a real opportunity to have good car speed and reliability and actually get a result. Whereas now it's kind of like, to be honest, even if you qualify fifth, like we were this year, I think we qualified fifth with Will. And we were a bit flat, like, this is going to be a hard day to get to the front. Yeah. And if you're third row, it shouldn't feel like that, but it definitely does now because everyone's operating at a good level.
I still think there's opportunity. Like, you've got to have car speed. We all know that when you go to that race, you've got to have car speed.
And Todd, didn't we?
Yeah,
they just
absolutely.
had mega car speed and it was theirs.
Yep. Yeah. But you can still, the good thing about Bathurst, and look, I still love it. I still think, I'm playing it from the driver's seat when I'm watching it, but I still think now with the bigger the bigger capacity fuel tank and things, there's more elements to do things differently now than there probably was
back then.
Gen 2.
Right.
I could be wrong, but I feel like what does frustrate me a little bit in the last few years is when you've got two guys that are going at it. Say like Kostecki, you've got a dominant guy and dominant car that's got the speed on the day. The guys running second do nothing different. They don't even try. It's more about we're gonna drive along, and if they break down, look out.
Yeah.
I don't get that. I think, well, okay, if you don't quite have the car speed, yeah, sure, you don't want to finish third or fourth or fifth, but if you're really going to have a crack at it, what's the alternate strategy?
Like even taking a punt on a safety car where you stop before the window, take a bit of fuel.
Thinking ahead a bit about, and I'll give you a bit of it's not the right example because it's Gen 2, but when I was driving with Frosty in 19 at Irwin Racing, we didn't have the car speed on the day, right? We were the 19th quickest car. If you look at our fastest lap time, we were the 19th fastest car. But at the end of the race, when all those safety cars started rolling out, we just kept pitting and putting fuel in it. And when the whole debris thing happened,
that's right.
We got a pretty full tank and everyone's had to pit. And we've just rocketed from last to fifth or sixth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But because we didn't have car speed, that's what we had to do to achieve any sort of result. And I don't understand why, or it appears in the past few years that the guys don't roll the dice a bit, don't have a look at that alternate strategy, not just follow the leader.
The challenge this year, I think, is the field spread was so big. Like to get to 130 something laps with no safety car, to do something alternate would be quite difficult. Only because I mean I didn't see a car that day. Like that was, I love that race.
Yeah, it was
and
exceptional.
I've been so excited to get there all year, and then to drive around. Like I felt like I did 3 stints of practice.
Yeah.
And it's a bummer because I have the Delta on the dash, and you're just going, okay, it's 18 seconds behind and 22 seconds in front, and I'm in the middle there.
Yep.
And that was me all day. But so I don't really know how we could have. I don't know what you do there. But Gen 2, I agree 100%. You look at Chaz Mostert when he was with Morris that year, and they had the crash and pulled it out, and they just kept putting fuel in all day. And then at the end, they're in the show. But yeah, Gen 3, it is hard.
I think last year, Gen 3, we keep talking about boring subjects like tyres, but having a soft tyre was a waste of time because it just meant everyone was driving to a number just to get to the next pit stop. But the harder tyre this year was good. Everyone was racing. Everyone was able to keep pressing on and do what they had to do. But yeah, look, that it's easy to sit on the couch and cheer from the fence. But it just seemed. I just wonder. It was a little bit like Cam Waters when Chaz won it in 2021, 22. When was that? When Chaz?
When Chaz is like
they were pretty dominant.
I think I think I was 21 off the top of my head.
Yeah,
that's right. And he started to have the tyre drama.
Yep. But why? Early on in the race, it was pretty clear why maybe the Tickford car should have tried something different. But anyway, it's easy. Like I said, it's easy.
Well, I mean, that's why we were pumped to get you on, because when you go through it, you've raced in pretty much every era of touring cars in Australia. So Super Tourers, most of the eras of supercar, all the way up to your last one with Landsy. What was that, 9? Oh, your last 1000 was 19 with Frosty, but you won it in 18, didn't you?
Yep.
So, you're probably a pretty good person to say what you think about the race. And just from our point of view, like what, in your opinion, was the best era of racing?
I like the last few years. I like the fact that everyone was a lot closer. That's better for me because it requires a lot more of a team effort when it's like that. Everyone has to hit their marks. Everyone has to, perform at their best throughout the team. The early years were good fun because of the amount of cars involved.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest difference. Back in the 90s, I think we had one year there was 55 V8s.
Imagine starting up near the bridge out into the last corner.
Around the corner, yeah.
That's actually, you take off and brake into the last corner and not turn one.
Yeah. So that's all pretty cool, and the difference in car speed was huge. So you literally were, when you're driving around, you're having to manage lap traffic. Now you don't really do that now. There's lap traffic, but they're all going pretty well the same speed as you. They're all looking forward and backward to see what's happening. There's not. They're not involved in their own 4-car battle that can go a bit pear-shaped. So, yeah, there's different elements. But we have that now with the 12-hour, don't we? You have lap traffic or,
Yeah.
It's
one issue we had this year was they didn't put out blue flags because of this lucky dog thing.
Oh, yeah.
They actually said we're not doing blue flags. And, I would be up the arse of someone and no blue flags, which was a strange thing. I mean, for the viewer, it's probably better they don't, because it was like I actually would come up on people and have to pass them legitimately.
Yes. Yeah.
But it is hard because you come up on the back of them and they're a lap down, but I still couldn't. It was so hard to get past them because they're actually still fast.
Yeah.
Even the guys at the back are still
absolutely.
fast.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I wanted to jump ahead quickly because when you jumped in, you're obviously in good cars and able to do it with your dad. And now you're going through it with Clay, where he's coming up through the ranks as a young driver. And we had this at the end, but I'm just really curious because there's people that listen that want to get to supercars or whatever. What are the biggest differences you see today in trying to get Clay into a supercar, or even having a shot at a Bathurst 1000 as a co-driver, as opposed to when you did it?
Yeah, it's massive, and you probably don't realise it as much when you're in it.
Yep.
You don't realise. I think there's a couple of things. Some of the rule changes now. Well, there's a couple of things. You now need super licence points, right? Back when I did it, we came straight out of Formula Ford.
Bang.
It was an era where the drivers who owned the teams were starting to leave the teams, and the teams were still functioning operations that needed something to turn over the sponsorship. So all of a sudden, getting young guys in was a thing, So people were giving young guys the opportunities to go and race. The second thing is the cost. So motor racing's always been expensive. That's neither here nor there. But I think back in the mid-90s to mid-2000s, even maybe before that, you could get a sponsor, reasonable sort of sponsorship, good partners, good brands. Really, the focus for their advertising spend was TV. It was only really free to air. There was some pay TV stuff going on then, but really, when you looked at your advertising budget as a company, it was TV. So then, okay, what are the assets we can be involved in? Motorsport, we were big, and mainly because of it is because of Bathurst, because what that race means to our sport. They could invest. Okay, I'm picking a number, $500,000. Well, really only cost $250 to run the cars for a year, right?
Yeah,
so you could actually make it work. And I might be a bit liberal with the cost, but what I'm saying is, someone could take a risk on putting a young guy in the second car, because generally you were pairing up both main drivers.
Yeah.
And you could give an opportunity. And from there, if that young bloke, and there's plenty of examples, there's Macro and Youlden, there's Whincup and Davison, there's so many guys that got to drive together without the pressure of actually having to get a result, and were given the opportunity, because it wasn't you had your two main guys in the lead car, and it was probably more of a risk back then because they were a little more susceptible to breakdown.
Yeah, you're not hedging your bets.
Whereas now, I think you're still going to, supercars and the broadcast, they want the race, so they want the main drivers to start. Well, pair your two main guys up.
Yeah,
then you got the whole race. Give it a different perspective, and then you can go and put the young guy that's just finished second in the Super 2 Championship, or the guy that's come out of Carrera Cup. Now, you're taking a risk, but that's what used to happen in the 90s and in the early 2000s. It used to happen.
And if we are looking at bringing young talent in,
Yep.
as a sport that needs to constantly evolve, you do need to do that. Like, it's almost got to be an enforced rule. I think that Triple Eight kind of screwed it with their dominance with Jamie and Craig when they paired them up.
Yep.
But you're right; it could have equally gone bad for them. Like, as a team, if they had anything go wrong, one crash, both their drivers are out, and they were title contenders too.
Yes.
So it could go either way, but that is probably where teams might push back. But then even sponsors splitting, I think actually Tickford did it really well, I think, by doing split liveries when you were with Frosty.
Yeah, that's
you
right.
both had great brands on board. So I was going to say it's not possible with the sponsors, but you guys did it and managed to keep the sponsors happy.
Yeah.
anything's possible.
It's almost
It was always I know it was always commercially, it was always a tough conversation to have. But at the end of the day, if someone else was pairing their two main drivers, you couldn't not do it because you couldn't take the risk of losing track position with a. But let's face it, nowadays, because the young guys who are getting Super 2 experience, they're already race hardened to those cars. They've already got speed, But the cost is the hard thing. So, if you talk to any dad that's got a young fellow that's trying to come up, you've got 86, which is awesome, right? The cost to do it, if mum and dad have got a decent income, you can actually go and do it, and you can go and do it for as long as you've got that decent income. Get a couple little sponsors on board, off you go. The void, and it probably was never intentioned this way, but now the next step is Super 2.
Yeah.
And you can cut it and carve it any way you want. You can say, well, you can go over and do Trans Am, or you can go and do, but ultimately supercars have made it that you have to come through the funnel.
Yep.
Right. And for us to go do that funnel, it goes from and because we do it ourselves, and I work on the car and Clay works on the car. Let's say it costs us $50,000, less damage, right? You can do the 86.
Wow.
Well, then we've got to go and find 550, not damage.
And that's on a deal.
That's on a deal.
That's on a deal, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know what it's like.
Yeah.
You know what it's like.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's
hard. It's really hard.
Just
And I'm not bleating about it because it's hard for everyone.
Yeah, that is the circumstances. What can supercars do anything different? Sorry, Bubs, to stop that funnel? Because I guess it's confidence from teams to get a guy in that has driven supercars, and we think it's like one thing Brock Feeney said to me, which I thought was a really good point, was he drove the old car at Wakefield Park, the race 1, I think it's
Yes.
called now.
One race.
And he
mate.
said,
Yeah, yeah,
shit, I think it's almost too close to the supercar, but so different still that it's actually bad. Like he goes, I wouldn't want to drive the two things on the same weekend.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
it feels like I'm in my supercar, but then it's so different that if I drive the Gen 3 like the Gen 2, I'm going to be in trouble.
Yes.
Whereas he said, I can drive a GT car and get out of the left-hand side and get in my supercar, and it feels like I'm driving something totally different, and it's fine to switch off between the two. So I was like, I thought that was an interesting take, that maybe you don't have to do Super 2 to do supercars now, but it's hard because teams have that embedded in them that you got to be. It's easier to trust a Super 2 kid.
And so does the system, because of the super license thing. So does the system. So it's difficult to get the opportunity now. Even if they said tomorrow, righto, all the main drivers are going to have to drive together, and that might encourage the team. You can't get the points. So there's a few things there.
That could change though, with particularly in Australia with money. Like in Europe and trying to get to F1, it's a very different.
Yes.
Like it's.
My opinion on the whole super licensing, it was brought in to stop just rich kids that were inexperienced coming and buying seats. Because a few years ago, you remember there was a couple of young guys coming in, and people were like, "Oh, it's probably not the best idea." So, but it actually, and you guys are a perfect example of that. That system, in my opinion, actually stops the kids with real talent being able to get the opportunities, because you have to do full championships to gain the points. And there's a lot of families out there that can pick up 2 or 3 races here and the kids do really well. But if they can't do a full year, and they've got heaps of experience because they've raced for however long, but if they can't do a full year, you can't get points because it goes on championship points. In my opinion, it needs to go back to Motorsport Australia, get someone that's experienced or a couple of key drivers like a Beardo or someone, and it's done as an evaluation.
Yeah.
They go through history, you've done this much.
Yep.
You haven't crashed much, you haven't been to the stewards much. The team want you. If a team wants you, and you're fast enough, you should get the opportunity.
That should be the validation to say that if that team's willing to put you in the car, then you should get an opportunity maybe.
Yeah, because I guess my original point of this was it was designed to stop people just buying their way in, but now you've got to go spend $600,000-700,000 for a couple of years, and then you can get your way in.
Yeah.
Or you can do 6 rounds and you're good.
Yes, you're still buying your way in.
You're buying your way in, you're just forcing them to funnel some of that money to supercar teams or the teams that run Super 2 on their way through. So it's that's my opinion on it. It kind of doesn't really work.
No.
Even with T8 running a Super 2 program now, like that, I mean, when I did it in 2012, the difference between my program and what Elliot ran, his $20,000 a weekend, I was at T8 with,
Monster.
we barely ran a fucking bonnet twice. Everything was amazing. And it's the same as like Chaz was with Tickford that year. Scotty Mack was Stone Brothers, which Scotty Mack's he won the championship, but he's might not have been as good a program as what Chaz and I had.
Yes.
Like that was Walkinshaw.
And it almost becomes that, like, with those guys coming in, that they're the seats you got to be in as well. So,
which Ryan touched on in that pod too, didn't he? He said there was 4 guys they were looking at, and it was the top for a Super 2 that year when they were going to sign.
Yeah.
It was off good looks though.
Yeah.
Not talent.
Clearly. On that, mate, Clay actually got his first taste of a supercar the other day. How'd he go?
He did, he went good. He was invited by the Walkinshaw guys to go and have a run. And, there were 4 guys up there. I think they had, they all got 15 laps each, whatever it was. And, I mean, don't get me wrong, that's a great opportunity.
Yeah.
What the supercars teams do to encourage young guys to come and have a drive, that's unreal. But he went good. He loved it.
Are they limited on testing for young guys? Are they, because they can only do so many rookie days, or was that?
Well, that's right. So I'm not sure how it works, but I think if you're not registered to run Super 2, then I think it's sort of, I don't know. It's technically you get a certain amount of days that you can practice. But I think once you register for the championship, then you're restricted. So I think at a genuine evaluation day, I'm not sure. I think is it 2 supercars allowed?
Yeah, I believe
2?
so. Yeah,
and that's good. Gives young blokes a bit of a taste, and then it gives the teams, I guess, the opportunity to see how. And look, I know Walkinshaw have certainly helped out young drivers in the past to fund a Super 2 program. So, there are certainly teams out there that are doing that, and whether it's by whether it's cash or partners or whatever, or whether it's actually trying to help in terms of when the damage does come, how they can subsidise some of that cost.
Yeah.
You know, I think generally, you know, there's the goodness of their hearts in trying to help a young guy, but it's still what you've got to come up with per round that's
and the damage, like if they can help out with that, that's often what does stop someone going to the next race.
Yes.
Because that can be, you know, it's there, but you sort of ignore it until it happens, don't you? Like I remember in Formula Ford, I had a crash and that ended us that year in state series. And you sort of budget the best you can, but the damage can. And Super 2. Yeah. 1 year at Bathurst, I saw they did 2 racing laps, I think it was.
Yes.
And it's like they've paid 80 grand, 70 grand for the weekend, and they got 2 racing laps. It's pretty.
Yeah, there's nothing worse.
It's pretty tough.
Driving around going, I might just brake here because I don't really have the 50 that I might need if this goes pear-shaped.
And that is exactly right. You need to go into that if you're serious about what you're trying to do, and every young bloke is. Yeah. You can't have that mentality if it's results driven and it's results that are going to see you take that step into the supercar arena.
Yep.
You can't go in there with the mentality of, geez, this could be my last race if I have a crack under brakes at this corner. You know, you can't. You just can't second guess.
No.
For you as a young bloke, was it always? I mean, obviously your dad. We all know who Jim is and the success that he had. Was racing always on the cards for you? You saw what he was doing, or you just loved it?
Yeah, yes and no. I'd say that early on, no, because I was his biggest supporter. I'd go to every race I could go to, but then I was playing soccer and cricket and stuff like that, and I was going all right in those sports. So, you know, there were weekends where it was a choice to make. Well, if it was a rep soccer tournament, that's where I'd be because that's what I wanted to do, and then. It really came from a friend of Dad's who bought a go-kart and said, you know, when you come down and have a drive. And I was 15, so I was quite late.
Wow.
And that's when it hooked me. But even at that point, it wasn't, for me, it wasn't, okay, right.
This is what I'm doing.
The pathway.
I'm going to go win 5 Bathurst.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not going to fuck around. I'm going to do 2 in my first 4 years.
Back to back a couple and then...
I hate to bring that up because I don't want you to feel like embarrassed that we just keep pumping that. I'm so blown away with your first 4 Bathurst starts. It's like ridiculous. So 15. So when was your first? How old were you when you did your first Bathurst start? Because you won. Yeah. Actually, you did win Formula Ford in your second season, and then
third season.
Oh, was it? Sorry. Yeah. And then you started supercars. Was it the year after you did your first co-drive?
So yes, yeah.
And
so
Super Tours as well.
94 was a Formula Ford season. Then I was at Gary's. I was a mechanic in the team and helping out. And at that point, Gary Rogers Motorsport was 3 guys.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. Even then.
Yeah. And then we dovetailed the first year was just Super Tours and Oscar out at Calder, and that was fantastic. And then the next year was V8 touring cars and the Super 2 program. So at that point, Australia sort of didn't know which way, or CAMS or the competitors didn't know. Super touring in the UK and globally was going massive. And that was sort of an area that Gary really liked. He liked that avenue, a little bit like he does now with the TCR stuff.
Yeah.
And then you had...
What car was he running for you then?
So the first year was an Alfa Romeo, which Gary... And that's a great story, and we haven't got time to go through all these great stories, but Gary went to Italy with Kay, his wife, and they... and Gary spent like 2 days in the pissing rain loading this container full of spares and the car from, I think it was Graf Racing in a French team.
They're still running now in LMP cars, aren't they?
Yeah. So he put it all together, packed the container, and I tell you what, when that container turned up as a young guy, it was like Christmas. It was like we opened this container and there's gearboxes and engines and diffs and only one car and bodywork, and it was like, oh my God, how good's this? You know, this is the car that won the British Touring. Well, not that car, but that car won the British Touring Car Championship the year before, and here I am. I'm going to get to drive it this year. Like it was unreal. So then so 96. First year in the championship as a whole, had a customer car. It was a Gibson Motorsport car. I think it was the car that Dad raced in '95 in the season, and then I did the co-driving thing with Winfield Racing, and then and that was 95, then 96, and then 97. It all started to get, we were doing our own stuff in terms of suspension development. You go and do lots of test days back then. So I remember, we'd be out at Calder.
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels like we were out there every third week having a run round in a car,
And what about tyres then? What were you running then?
So initially we were on Dunlops in 96, and then as our results got better, we were able to get the customer Bridgestones.
Right. Because I heard a story like Lounsey going to Phillip Island, there was a truck.
Oh, yeah.
HRT would take a Bridgestone truck and they just would run around tyres all day.
They had steer tyres and drive tyres.
Yeah.
So they'd go and try, we don't need to tune the car up. Let's just throw a different tyre at it and see if that gets it to turn harder and drive harder. So yeah, it was pretty wild back then.
Were the budgets of again, like a little bit off topic, were the budgets bigger then for the tyre manufacturer, do you think? Like how were they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And it wouldn't have been cash so much. It would have been just go testing and.
Well, that's a massive performance part. If you can just change tyres and you've got a manufacturer of a tyre that's supporting it, it's a cost you don't have to. It's probably a good thing they got on top of that though, because otherwise,
absolutely,
there was always haves and have-nots.
Yeah, because you'd go to some tracks, wouldn't you? And it was like, as you know, that's a Yokohama track. And then all the Yoki cars would dominate, and then you go somewhere else. And
Dunlop would, like the Grand Prix was a Dunlop track. Yeah, right, absolutely Dunlop track. Anywhere where it was hard on tyres like Perth, Bridgestone all the way. Every time you went, there was a Bridgestone tyre. So
you never heard about parity back then, though, did you?
Nah, you didn't.
Or was it just not as public? Like internally, there was a lot of chat about it?
I don't know. Well, I think it was less about parity and more about what tyre you're on.
But that's what I mean. Parity in terms of tyre, though.
Yeah, but the parity wasn't driven by, hey, we've got to change our car. It was, okay, who's going to be what on the tyre? And you always had, so Bridgestone and Dunlop and Yokohama always supported a Ford team and a Holden team as their top team. And then you got the.
Oh, so you could choose the tyre when you'd go to it. Like,
not us. We would get what
like,
we would get what we're given, but the team, certainly the teams could. They could choose a tyre from what they tested, or we've got a new tyre, we think this will have more turn or whatever. Yeah. And
just going back on the Ozcars, how was the dome, mate? Because I remember as a young fella, because my uncle raced around the dome quite a bit.
Yep.
Going there as a kid watching, and like it was packed, and I still don't live far from Calder now, and I drive past every day going to work. I'm like, I just remember that whole grass area being full. It was wild.
Awesome. It was awesome. And for a couple of reasons, you could go testing out there. That was really good. And when you're transitioning as a young bloke from one thing to another, that was really handy. But you're right. They were single day race meetings. So you turn up, you practice at 11 a.m. You get one practice session. You go out at 4 for qualifying.
Yeah, good.
You qualify, and then you go and do in Oscar. I never did NASCAR, but in Oscar, you did a 110 lap race. And it was awesome for two reasons. Because it was a good distance and you're out on track for an hour, 15 sort of thing. But the Goodyear Eagle tyre that we used was just a road tyre, and you had to buff it.
Right.
And if you went flat out right from the outset, you'd blow a tyre before the end of the race and you'd be in the fence. So you had to manage it. And everyone knew that was what you had to do, right? So until you got to that there was always a safety car. Maybe sometimes it was a bit played out that there was going to be a safety car at some point, but generally someone would crash between lap 60 and 90, and then it was a full-on race and you went for it. But it was really, really good fun. And, Shane comes in and talks about all the stuff that he's doing and how the cars race, and okay, Calder's only one track, but that's exactly how it was. Side draft, you got a good feel for side drafts and bump drafting and doing all that sort of stuff. And it was awesome. It was really good racing.
I had when Shane did come on, he was talking about that. Is that what you're saying, that when he came on here? And
yeah.
And I was fascinated by the amount of, because we get a small amount of side drafting.
Yep.
But it's always in a straight line, and you're really just trying to break the side draft. Like you're always chasing each other across the track.
Up, yeah.
But I was fascinated by him saying about how much aero you lose in a corner when someone's beside you, and how when you come down on someone's door, it can take away.
Yep.
So all that stuff, like people say, how's turning left fun?
Okay. Yeah.
That's what makes it it's tactical racing. It's just different, I think, as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It is exciting.
But good is different. You go and do something different. It's great, you know, and then you get an experience on a heap of different things.
And back then on the Dome, that was quite profitable for a lot of people too. I remember hearing like it was like Speedway spec with prize money.
Yeah,
and things.
yeah, prize money, and they pay appearance money for you to get to the track and stuff like that. When it was going really strong, that was awesome. It was really good. You could, you know, some of our friends that we pitted with, they could almost run on the appearance money because the cars were cheap, you know, and they were pretty reliable. They were pretty bulletproof. They were running on the appearance money, you know. They're just coming out for the race meetings and doing what they had to do, put a set of tyres on it, and they could afford to do it.
I'd love to see supercars because the Gen 3 car, I think is quite a good product. I think it is good, and I enjoy racing it. And it's never going to go back to how it was where the cars are cheap and
No.
It's never going to, because technology moves. Half the shit's built out of carbon. It's like it's just not cheap to repair.
Yep.
But I think the format and time on the road is something we can 100% play with. Like you talk about one-day formats, and then you could introduce wild cards that can come and do it, and it's not a 4-day exercise. And also the wild cards only being really at certain events is hard as well. But a single day event where you can have an extra 5 wild cards turn up, which are Super 2 cars, and you do races that aren't fueling races.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing too. I was going to ask you if you think there should be more cars at the Bathurst 1000, but Super 2, the challenge is a lot of them don't have permanent crews to set up pit booms and everything. So there's garages there, but it's not as easy as just turning up. But if you did some sprint format, single day events, you could actually have some Super 2 people come in with a good enough program to be competitive.
Yeah.
And there's enough Gen 3 cars that can be built that can be shared around.
Yep.
And a Super 2 car can, like, then you can pair people up that are ran by a main series team.
Give people a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they've limited though that teams can only run one wild card entry per year.
Yes.
But I think you could change that and say it's got to be for it can't be someone that's done X amount of races or something, because then you do start to see them use it as a testing program. But we've already got testing restrictions. Do you think that would be a good idea to maybe limit the event time and do the odd race, which is a single day event, have more cars on the track? And
I do, but I also can understand and appreciate with the value, the commercial value of the sport, that to run a single day event, you don't get a lot out of that for the lead up, for the stories, for the things that help you sell it.
And not even if it was 15 events instead of 13. So the extra 2 are actually additional, not replacing.
I think it's just coming up with what's the model. I think you're right. The whole, being a dad that's got a son, the whole at the moment for us is, okay, it's always going to be about how much, right?
Yeah.
But what are the different ways we can skin the cat? You know, how if we can go and get the first 2 Super 2 races underway, and it goes okay, jag a top 5, people go, oh, you know, that's not a bad effort. Okay, now then can we, you know, how do we get a co-drive? You know, well, you're not going to, but maybe then there's an opportunity. Maybe there's something else that can come out of, you know, the teams can actually go, how can we give a young guy a go? It's not going to cost us, you know, $1 million, and we know how hard it is to find the dough at the moment.
And they do get a benefit out of it anyway, because they're capping it, saying one team can only run one wildcard entry, so it's not seen as testing. But let them get a benefit.
Yeah,
you know, maybe it's like if you're in the, you know, the top end of the championship, maybe you can only run one wildcard. Like a T8, maybe you can't run 10 wildcards. But you know, the smaller teams can then give a shot. Because I'm not a dad, but we are here having a conversation about.
Yeah, it won't be long.
Not that I know of.
Won't be long.
Not that I know of, though. It's possible. Might find out after this pod goes out.
Are you travelling, Steve?
Yeah, I'm all right, mate. Yeah.
But the best thing, what we're trying to do is just have conversations about the whole sport and the way it's ran at the moment, and trying to change what's currently happening, because I think we need more opportunity for young people coming up to even just get opportunity to show that they're capable, so they can secure a co-drive with a top team the following year even. So if it is a wildcard entry, like Cooper Murray at Darwin, to qualify where he did, it didn't even matter what he did after that in the Enduros.
Right.
It was a done deal that he could get I think it was after that, Barry said to someone, or I read it somewhere, he decided at Darwin that's when they signed him.
I heard that, yeah.
And I'm like, that's so cool to hear, because it might not be that he gets signed for a full-time gig, but maybe Clay rolls in and we're at a Winton for a single day event,
Yep.
which low cost to run it, and it's an additional event to what we've already got.
Yep.
And he runs really well at a track he's done some miles at, gets a top 10, and people go, fuck yeah, like no mistakes, quick enough. Let's put him in as a co-driver.
Yep.
Because, I mean, I love, not to single out Luffy, and it's important. Obviously, that's his job as well to co-drive.
Yes. Yep.
But I would love to see young kids come through. Like, I know it as a co-driver, I shouldn't have a shelf life which is just extended because I have experience.
Yes. Yep.
I'd love it if that's how it stays, and that's what I'm sure like Luffy and everyone else thinks.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'd love to see you take yourself out, you take the bias hat off, and there should be young kids that have some way of getting a chance.
Yep.
Keeps the sport fresh.
Yeah, it does. Yep. And I guess the other side to that is you've got to be careful you're not flushing the sport with too many new people that people don't recognise. So there's a balance.
Yeah.
There's got to be a balance, but you've got your main guys. And I think for me this year, from a personality perspective, was probably one of the best years that we've had for a while. Like people are actually showing a bit of, this is what we do. And, I think it's been great this year. It's probably been less of this and a bit more of this with some of the personalities, and that's been good.
Some of the personalities people say that they love. Let you do your sound check.
No, please talk.
Some of the the drivers that people love, like Jazz, you're always seeing a happy side of them. Mm-hmm. But I had made a note of one of my questions is, you've been through the category long enough where you changed from being a championship that was not really sure of where it sat. It was professional, but it was not at the level it's at now. And it seemed like when I watched a lot of the old races in the last few days before you came on, I just wanted to watch the personalities, the interviews, the races, how they unfolded. And I just spent some time watching. Yep. And I would see drivers pissed off on TV, like do an interview. And of course, you got Alan Jones, someone who's pretty outspoken, and some of his interviews were passionate. But
Jim at Bathurst.
It was rare to see just everyone smile. And I think Lounsey kind of changed it because he became so popular with the fans. So it was like, even when he had a bad day, he could still smile. And it became a thing that people loved. But there does seem to be a point where, like, no one's showing their pissed off side. They're almost crashing. And then if they can hold a smile, everyone's like, oh, that's a good lad.
There is, you would probably know better than me, mate, but there's certainly a bit of pressure now because of social media.
Yeah.
There's elements to that where people can just be assholes on it. So there's probably a reluctance for people to sort of step out of the crowd for fear of going through the next week of being smashed by someone that can because they've got the opportunity to write something, So maybe that's a part of it. But and look, for me, my personality, I was pretty neutral through. But when things weren't right,
2010, Rick Kelly.
Yeah.
What happened there?
I
don't remember. I saw you put in notes, but I actually don't remember that.
Oh, it was quali, and Rick thought that I had, and you know what Simmons is like. You've got to, you can't be any more than 2 seconds apart because otherwise you come across traffic. So I that's what we were doing, and then got out of the car, no drama. Oh, that's right. No, Rick came up next to me after the checkered flag, come around in front of me and jumped on the brakes, brake tested me, and I didn't actually really know what it was about. So when we come in the pit lane, I said, "This is not on. What's going on here?" So I went up to see him, and he came marching out, and probably for me, I knew probably at that point that was going to be my last full-time season. And Rick said a few things, right, in relation to that, and I didn't like what I heard. So I grabbed him by the scruff of the throat, and then Matty House comes running out from the garage.
It was good. I saw it, and Rick's this like young, tall, skinny, like rake, and you just had him by the scruff, and he's like being walked backwards. It's like me at the gala, but it was funny as I was like, I saw the photos, and I was like, I got to bring that up because when we're talking personalities, you were like to grab hold of someone, and it's no harm. Like
no, you're not going to hurt
but
him.
I reckon
no.
I'd worry about.
We were
that
probably
today.
having a beer that night somewhere down in
Even
Tasman,
your driver interviews on the grid after sounded like Rick was like, "Nah, it's all good fun. Like it is what it is." I was angry. I think he said because he acknowledged that he thought you were in the wrong.
Yep.
Because that was when I first saw the article, when I was looking at it, I'm like, oh, it looked like maybe you were giving him a spray for something, but it ended up being that he thought you were in the wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was like, what actually happened?
And I was just confused.
You're like, what's going on? Brake check me. I'm going to go, buddy.
It was good. But I would love to see, and you're right, though, it is socials, I think. Because even Murph said to me once, we were chatting at Bathurst, and I said, why do you think drivers are different now where we're not showing our anger or like frustration? We're not really venting on TV. We're not going like, I'm pissed off. We're not saying that or saying this guy screwed me. And I do think because everyone back home, like my dad, he was a one-eyed Ford supporter. It wouldn't have mattered what Scafey said. Scafey was in the wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
And if Scafey said he didn't like Glenn Seaton, my dad on socials, if he was on it, would have said, Scafey, you're a prick. You're wrong. Wouldn't have mattered the incident.
Yeah.
So, he said when I had arguments with Ambrose or whatever at the track when that was all kicking off, the worst thing I had to worry about was going and seeing an article in Auto Action or whatever it was that didn't like what I had said or something, or maybe it was just not spun in my direction. But I didn't have to open my phone up and see relentless Ambrose fans slamming me. He's like, I think that's different. So he's that
threatening you with death and things. I mean, now that's
out of control.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. I don't know. Do you guys think that's the case? I think it is. I think
I
probably
agree with
because there was some great press conferences after races and stuff where Murph's or Russell, or Gold Coast.
Gold Coast, where there's another brake test. Was that Rick again?
Not sure.
Down the back straight?
Rick, it was Rick.
He likes it.
Ambrose and Rick at Gold Coast.
That's right.
Brake testing demon.
We've just worked something out there.
Hang on, maybe it was Ambrose. Rick's going to text me.
Oh,
no,
I think
it wasn't
it was
I reckon it was Ambrose brake testing.
Ambrose and Murph, was it? Yeah, sorry, Rick.
Rick's going to text us after this and go, fuck you guys, it wasn't me.
You guys don't know what you're talking about.
The sport doesn't. Some people say is it the sport that stops us being who we are. In terms of like what we're doing, yes, the sport has been like they would rather we didn't exist for sure. But in terms of like drivers being themselves, I've never felt that like driver argument, they would love it. It's good for the sport. So it's not that I agree with you. I think it's socials that stops drivers being that way. With us, like of course ours is just that the only concern they would have is that we talk about the elephant in the room sometimes. Yeah. So I get that. I can understand why sometimes corporate would love to just not talk about it. But in terms of driver's personality on the track or having an argument like we see with George Russell, Max Verstappen at the moment, I reckon the sport would love that. So hopefully the fans, and I think comments are getting more positive. Like they hear our podcast and like it humanises people a little bit more. And they're not, like I crashed at Bathurst. You would have seen that probably. And I took the piss out of myself for it. Unfortunately, like these guys in our group chat said, you have to post your crash now. And I'm like,
you missed an Apex champ.
I shared it. And
see, pressure from your mates as well.
Oh, mate, as soon as I did it, they're like, no one's safe. Because I think about a week before, I'd posted Shane making the mistake through the bus stop at Watkins. Yeah. And he got past and he was like, mate, you're up now. Like, you fucked up. But the comments were not too bad. They actually were like, hanging shit on me. But that's fine. I deserved it. Yeah. But they weren't calling for me to retire or, and that's where I think you chat to people. And also we're talking about the difference in cars and teams. Like I'd love to hear as well, you drove for a number of teams. We can get to it now. Like, what do you think separates the good teams or the front running teams? I don't ever want to say good and bad because they're all fucking amazing. But what do you think, like Tickford, when you drove for them, what was it that you saw them do really well?
Just to me, it's always about structure and process and systems. The good teams do it well. The bad teams don't, and you don't class them as bad teams. The less successful teams don't. To me, because you can have the same guys go and work in a different team, and the result doesn't change. Yeah. But the guys that know what to do to change things will go to that team, change things, and it'll get going. And to me, one of those examples is Couchy, right? DC's gone from 888 where everything's tickety-boo, and they work hard on it, and they've got good leadership, and they've got people that have been experienced there for years and years and years. You take that guy, you put him in a team that's got good resource that can make shit happen, and then you start to see progression. It's always going to be difficult to try and get to that level of 888 where they've got 20 years of it behind them, that's or Tickford, but Tickford have been through some highs and lows, for various reasons themselves as well. But I think genuinely the difference is it's the people and how they measure performance. And I'm a big stats guy, right? Even the stuff that I do nowadays in the caravan industry and with our specific manufacturer is just measure stats, so we can control things and we can see things before they happen, whether it's a production item or whatever. Now, I remember when I was with Triple Eight, and you'll be the same, I'm sure, you get fed reports after each session and it keeps you accountable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I just laugh because I've never had that much information after a Bathurst.
Right. And when you don't know, you don't know. But when you do know, and you can actually start to focus on what that information means, and you can get some time to sit down with someone who can explain it to you, then it can affect your performance, right? Because look, a classic case for me was when I was with Triple Eight co-driving with Craig. There was a point where my contract was rolling over or changing, and RD, like, my performance wasn't bad, but it was like, why shouldn't we go and get someone else? Right? Why shouldn't we? Oh, and I had to write him an email, and I felt uncomfortable doing it, and actually state, well, this is why I think. And anyway, not because of that, but for if you're accountable all the time. To me, I was always one where I like to get as much information as I could from the team to understand where are the ways that I could improve my performance. Now, if you're in a team that doesn't have the ability to do that, I think that's the difference.
You don't know what you don't know either. Like, I
that's
this
exactly
year turned up and gone, oh, it's where Couchy's taken so much good information, and you go, and no, I don't mean setup, but as in, at some teams they'll come to you and say, like, what information do you need? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, you've got so much, and you're always trying to think of what else you could get. But I go to T8 this year, and just the notes I get after a session, and then the bigger teams have someone that at the workshop can spend the time to sit with me and explain what it all means. Whereas some of the smaller teams, like Krusty, I always feel bad for. One of the best engineers, I think, in pit lane, but before test day, sometimes he's working on radios.
Yeah, that's right.
And so the smaller guys, smaller teams are stretched really thin. And,
right.
and then I wouldn't get the time to sit with him. I'd come in a workshop to see him, and it's like, oh, sorry, mate, I can't actually sit with you. And so this year, that's been a big difference. But you're right with the information that you get, and it means that you don't end up focusing in an area that didn't need attention. And that's been a big one for me this year. I reckon, if you had 10 years of what you had this year, it's a very different situation, and it's a lot easier then to be calm as well in bad situations because your energy's not. You're very focused. But it's tough because I don't think it's just budget. Like everyone always says, but the money comes as a result of the success as well. There's a point where everyone has to start. Like T8 doesn't roll in with just the biggest budget. It's like when Penske came, he had to put his hand in his pocket.
And look,
of course,
at the
he had
turnaround.
brands. But success brings the rest of it. So it's like, how do you get the success first is a really, really tough thing.
You've driven some pretty cool cars. I just want to tip back to that a little bit, Richo. And when we were going through your Bathurst stuff today, one of the cars, which is like the poster car for me growing up, was the 427 Monaro.
Oh, yeah.
That you won the 24-hour race in. But what's been your favourite race car that you've raced or driven over the years? Because you've driven some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I think, as a race car driver, all we ever want to do is go faster, right? So I think, probably for me it was the M6 GT3 that we ran.
Actually, you and I raced against each other.
Yeah, and that was
good-looking car.
Yeah, that was a good car. It was great at Bathurst. It wasn't so good on the street circuits, but when it was hooked up right and you had everything going for you, it was awesome. It had good power, good torque. Okay, it wasn't as fast as a supercar down the straight, but across the top of the mountain, there's nothing better. And you always measure, I guess, the feeling of adrenaline or the risk versus reward and what you get out of it when you hold that extra 10% throttle as you're coming down into the grate and see what the car does to react. So for me, it's probably that car. But I've got to say, right at the end of my time driving GT3 cars and then where the Gen 2 supercars were, You didn't drive them any differently. And I think that's
Yeah,
why
right.
in sort of 17, 18, 19, not so much 19, but to me, I could have not driven that car all year and come out to Sandown and Bathurst and still done a good job, because it was almost identical to how I was driving the M6. So to me, there was a lot of crossover in that. But there's lots of other, like you think, I've got a little Ford Escort, right?
Yeah.
It's a replica of a Group 4 BDG Cosworth Lucas mechanical fuel injection, and I did a hill climb 15 years ago in it, Lake Mountain.
Oh, how good's Lake Mountain? I've done a hill climb up there.
It's awesome because it's not really that much of a climb. So a little car like that weighed 830 kilos
Can hustle.
and had 280 horsepower. It was we were the fastest two-wheel drive car against Porsche GT3s,
all sorts of things, yeah.
because it suited the car. But that car, it's got nothing, no aero, no nothing.
Yeah.
It's got a normally aspirated 2-litre engine, no power steering, but it is awesome. It's just one of the best fun cars to drive for all those reasons.
Yeah.
What were the Super Tourer days like, and also racing 2 Bathurst 1000s almost back to back? Because it was, I think, I didn't understand it today.
Yeah.
I had no
Yeah,
idea that
yeah.
that was kind of how it worked. And I think it was like the disagreement through broadcast between
Yeah, that's
7
right.
and 10
Yeah.
and Avesco
Yep.
and the Australian Racing Drivers Club. Like, it was actually quite fascinating to read today that they couldn't come to an agreement. So that Bathurst decided to give them the second event.
Yep.
And so you ran in 97, I think it was only 2 weeks apart, or maybe, 10 days apart.
Yeah, it was something like
And
that.
you came runner-up to your dad, and then you won in, was it not? It must be 98.
yeah,
It must be 98. So
98,
you ran
98.
second to your dad in Super Tourers, I think it was, and then
Yes.
the supercar race you won with
Yep.
Murph.
Yep.
What was that period of Super Tourers like, and then jumping straight back into a supercar?
Because they're very dangerous.
Yeah, they are, but I to be honest, I don't really remember, to be honest. But
Yeah.
I'd spent particularly 98. So 98, we finished second at the Super Tour and then won with Bridie in the Stone Brothers
sorry,
car.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
But-
right, it was too, yeah.
But I wasn't. I was over in the UK racing for Nissan, and I just thought it was unreal, because I'd gone from Gary Rogers, who we were doing a great job, young team coming up through the ranks, to Stone Brothers. It was like I couldn't believe how good the engine was.
All right.
I was just, where's this been happening for so long, So when I got in that car, instantly I was just confident, right?
Yeah.
I just thought, take a few laps to get up to speed. But at Sandown, it was like, oh, we're on here for sure. Like, this thing it's a step up from what I've come from. So, I think that era was pretty cool, because you're right. I got to drive some really, really cool cars.
Yeah.
And
If I looked through the list of what I could find on the
Yeah.
net today, and I was just like, that would be almost the dream list. Like,
yeah.
GT3 cars, some of the best supercars I've ever raced.
Yep.
Super Tourers. Yeah,
Yep.
just crazy. And you did the dome stuff with Oscar.
Yeah,
Did you ever
No,
drive
I
a
was really
NASCAR?
lucky.
'Cause
No,
you-
I never drove a NASCAR. It probably would have happened the year that it sort of stopped, because we were talking about getting a second car, and Dad he was running in a team, and there was talk about us getting a second car and doing something there possibly. But then the Thunderdome stuff sort of fell off the perch, because it was costing Bob a bit, I think. But the 427 was great too, because of the project, and this is back at a time where both Holden and Ford, they were spending money outside supercars to go and do things in other avenues to promote different products, because they were selling so many cars. They had the money and the wherefore to do it. So very, very. I'm so lucky with some of the stuff that I've been able to do, because of all the people that have done it with me. You don't think of it at the time. You think that's just, you deserve it. That's what we should be doing.
Yeah.
But no, now you look back and you go, man, so cool.
I look at that team that you won the 24-hour with. That would have been a fun Sunday night. It's a fun group of guys that you won that race with.
Who did you do it was 2002, wasn't it, I think, or something?
Yeah,
Yeah.
02.
Who did you do the 24
So
hour
it was myself, Garth, Cam McConville, Nathan Pretty.
Oh, yeah, that would have been.
And then the other car, the second car had Murph. Who was in the second car?
Yeah, Todd, Murph, Brock, and Bridie. Bridie?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bridie.
So, yeah, you put those 8 down at the pub on a Sunday after a pretty good weekend. It would have been pretty fun, I
It's a
reckon.
24-hour like at Bathurst. That'd be tough, wouldn't it? Like it'd be.
Yeah, it was. But initially, I think in 2002, originally we were going to run with 3 drivers. But 3 drives, you would have been toast because you couldn't be the reserve driver waiting to get into the car. You had to have that gap where you could get some sleep in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So you had to have one guy ready to get in, the guy that's just got out, the guy that's sleeping, and the guy that's in the car. You couldn't do it with 3 because even when you were double stinting at night, you're really only getting probably 2.5 hours sleep by the time you got to bed. But yeah, I mean, very different, particularly in Australia because we didn't do a lot of that style of racing.
Yeah.
So
And at Bathurst too, then we see Ruse as a drummer now, but through the night was.
never.
Was it all right?
No, it was only really in the morning, like
Okay.
dawn. Dawn was the worst time. A couple of roos, but not during the night. Nothing.
Talking Ruse, someone did throw in a question about, do you still hate that kangaroo? Because there was that one up at the cutting, remember that year?
Yeah, of course.
So if talking about them at the 24-hour wasn't an issue, but it was at the 1,000.
Yeah, that was a tough one because that was a year we qualified on pole, and it was probably I was driving with Dad. That was the last time we drove together, and realistically, that was the opportunity to, if you were going to win it one year, that was the year. So the lead up went pretty well, and then, but that happens.
It is motorsport, yeah, that's the thing. Scott McLaughlin once said a quote that was like, Bathurst is like Christmas. Everyone's excited, but you're not all guaranteed a present.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just heard it once and was like, that's such a great way to put it because we all rock up so excited and, your ambitions and everything. It's like, you start your day thinking, fuck, this could be it. But it's one thing I've learned, and I want to ask you because I've never won it, but every year I go, I've always said to myself, like, it's not over until it is literally over. Like anything can happen throughout the day because it's not a 24-hour or 12-hour race, but it's long enough that you can get back in it. And I think, when you're younger, keeping your head in the game is quite a challenge because there's moments in it's the longest race we do all year. So at 300 Ks in, something could happen.
Yeah.
And you think, it's all over because that's the longest race we've done all year.
Yep.
And then you realize you're not even halfway. And it's such a different mentality.
It's tough for that reason. Like there have been times where I've done the first stint and I've gone, today's going to be terrible. It's just not. We're nowhere near. The car's got so much oversteer. I don't know if we'll be able to tune it out, but the day comes to you, right? The day comes to you, and then by the second and third last stints, it's actually going good. Then I've had days where you start that first stint, the car's a jet, and you're going, how good is this? We're on, right? And it rains,
Yeah.
or something else happens. I mean, 08 was probably the most disappointed I've ever been because
it was a frosty year through the chase.
Yeah, that was 07. No, that
Fire
was
in the boot?
No. So 08.
Another one.
08, we strategized our way to the front, right? The car started pretty good, but it had a bit of push, and it just got more and more push as the day went on, and we just could not tune it out of the car. Don't know why. And got to the last stint, and the only way to get the car to turn was to use the throttle, right? So midway through the stint, the tyres are fried. We're running second, right? We're running second, and probably would have finished second, but then got a safety car, and then just got gobbled up by everyone. I think we finished fourth, but that day was just shit. Like it was terrible because it promised so much, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't because of the car's performance that we got to second place. It was because the guys had strategized, worked like, and then we come away with nothing, no reward for their efforts, But that's what it's like. That's what the place is like. You've experienced it, you know. We've all experienced those moments during the year where, you think you should be given the result, you know, for how the car feels, but it doesn't happen because something goes wrong.
Feels like that race, like if I end my career and haven't won a Bathurst, of course, right now, all I want to do is win. And the feeling of being on both ends of winning and not having it go your way. But it's like one of those races that if I'm sitting back once I've retired and if I don't win one, it's kind of the race, I won't feel hard done by at any point because so many people have this story at Bathurst that,
Yep.
and that's what I love about it. That was the one thing I didn't like about 2019. When all that stuff happened with McLaughlin and Debris and all that,
Yep.
felt like it almost guaranteed results, whether it was first or in the race, it affected the outcome of the result.
Yep.
And for me, it took away from what Bathurst is about, because I don't think we should have, it's like it chooses you almost. That's why I don't feel like I'd ever feel ripped off if I don't win it, because to win it, you got to do everything right all day. And like you said, you got to have the team hit their marks. You've got to make no mistakes all day, and you got to have a fast car. But it's not a race that you should be able to manipulate.
No,
to win.
no,
You know,
right.
I think that's what makes Bathurst special for me, I think. But what's some advice to a young bloke or me to win it?
Yeah, young bloke or a middle-aged guy that just desperate for one.
Just asking for a mate here. How can I win? Like just one would do. You know, I don't need five. I'm not greedy.
You know, mate. You've done this enough. There's no, like you say, you've got to have a fast car. You've got to have a good team. There are certainly things that you can do during a race, and I don't know what some of the mentalities of the driver now. But I remember as a co-driver in 18, and I don't, you know, it wasn't my most brilliant performance, but we got away with it. But the last stint, we had enough car pace that rather than risk a move to get to the front, I think we were running fourth or fifth, and I just saved fuel the whole stint, right? And the guys didn't really get away. I just save fuel. Yeah, I wanted to see the lap time. And the other thing that was from that perspective for me on that day was Irish, who was our engineer.
Yep, I remember.
He said, look, mate, I can't. We're saving all the greens for Lounsey. I'll give you the best set of fronts that we've had through the race. But wasn't dejected about that, and then was able to save enough fuel. When we come and did the stop, we popped out second. Right, so there are still things you can do, and for me, it was always all about, right, how can I contribute? Okay, the car's not that good today. What's the contribution I can make for this to help us get there? You know, and it's circumstantial because it's what's happening on the day. You can't go and think I'm going to do this and that's what's going to. It's in the moment, right? Oh shit, the guys aren't getting away from me. I'll just roll off early and try and make a bit up on it. All of a sudden you save 3 seconds of fuel. Well, he's only 3 seconds up the road.
You've jumped him.
So to me, that's the sort of value you can bring. And that's what I always did, whether it was a driver or co-driver, whether it was... I was one when we were in our debriefs. I know I was a co-driver, but I felt if I didn't say what I felt, I wasn't giving them what they needed, right? And it might be 180 degrees different to what Frosty was saying or Lounsey was saying, but I just felt there's enough experience with me to say something. They might ignore it, but it might lead to something.
Yeah. Right.
So that's probably another thing. And I'm not a, you know me, I'm not an outwardly
humble guy. Yeah.
But if I've got an opinion on something, they want to know. And a team like Triple Eight, they want to know.
Well, hearing you say that, it's really funny because you're at Triple Eight, you would have spoken to a lot of the same people in a debrief. And the last race we did, the only thing I said in the whole debrief after Bathurst was exactly, it's funny because it's exactly what you're saying there. I felt, and it was 180 degrees to what Will and Andrew Edwards wanted in the car. Yep. And we chased it all day, but we couldn't get the balance we were looking for, and the change that they were making. It's not my car, it's not my ship that day, but I'm trying to just contribute to the race and do like you say, you know, you're looking for little opportunities throughout the day to try and help find a way to the front, whether it is saving fuel or whatever might happen if a safety car comes. But Sunday night, I sort of chatted to Andrew briefly about it, but in the debrief, I waited till the very end and I did say, hey, I know this is 180 degrees to everyone else's thoughts, but this was mine. Yep. This is where I thought maybe we could have gone with the direction. And it may well be wrong. But it's like I felt like maybe, you know, I've had experience where I'd had a car that lacked turn or, you know, you're burning the rears off it because you're trying to get it to rotate. Or for us that day as well, we struggled with late drive, like when you're still turning. So the cutting out of there was a bit of a drama. But yeah, it's funny because it is the same people I'm talking to today. Yeah. And I wasn't like passionate throughout the day or anything trying to push it, but I did feel like it's important to just add that little bit. Yep. Because you never know what might come from it. They might go there next year and go, you know what? let's just try that through a practice session and see what happens.
Absolutely.
Might be right, might be wrong.
And some teams are open to it, some teams aren't, but I figure if you at least put your point across, it's information for someone that can be used at some point.
You've had some pretty good teammates over the years and people that you've co-drove with or teammates in the other car. Is there anyone that stands out that you're just like, man, this guy's good?
Frosty was good when he was on.
Yep.
It's hard to beat.
Frosty's a good qualifier. I found like he made me better when he joined.
Yep.
When I joined Team 18, because you talk about him, he was like JC. I thought was really quick, but I could do a quali session and be like, we might be ahead of him with that average lap if he made a mistake. Frosty just didn't seem to make many. Like qualifying, and if the car was fifth or sixth at worst, he'd be fifth or sixth. It's like he never would be eighth. Trying to get something out of a car that was fifth.
Always maximise.
Found Frosty I was waiting to see what your answer would be there because I did find him really hard to beat.
Even Paul Dumbrell, like no, people probably don't give Paul as much respect, and he just got better and better. Like he kept getting better and better and better. And when I was racing with him at the end, he was in sort of Bottle-O and I was in the Dunlop car in 2010, I think it was. He was really good at that point. It's a shame. Yeah, he was. And even the 888, like, he was unreal.
Did he decide that? You may not know.
He just had a busy life. He was starting family and he was busy at work, but he just kept getting better. Because I was with Paul at Larry's as well. Paul was my teammate at Larry's, and he was a young guy then. And very, very raw, but occasionally fast. Like we were talking about 04 at Bathurst. Paul went out and out of nowhere put it third in the shootout. And I thought,
where'd that come
man,
from?
that's gonna be quite hard to beat.
Yeah.
and he finished third, he was third in the shootout. So Paul, geez, I always wonder, I think, and no disrespect, Paul, but I thought if he didn't have the amount of business interests he had, but then I think that's probably what helped him become a better and helped him become a better driver because he was able to, his mentality as a 19, 20-year-old was so different to when he started his own businesses and doing. I just think he just kept ramping up as a driver. It was almost like the busier he got, the better he performed because somehow his state of mind was, I don't know the answer, but Paul really impressed me.
Sometimes maybe helps to separate yourself from the racing too. We talk about drivers loving to just drive every week. Sometimes guys need to separate the racing from, and turn up to a weekend feeling fresh to go racing again. Like Frosty said, he used to love when once he had kids. It's like, I look forward to going home and having a home life, come back to the track rejuvenated and ready to go again.
Yes.
Maybe Paul's one of those guys when he was just racing, maybe it was the pressure and you make one mistake and then that's all you've got to think about until the next race.
And he was driving for LP. LP was always a hard man on young blokes.
Actually, while we're talking about teammate, who was your hardest boss, LP? Any funny stories out? There would have been some funny stories out of
LP.
Garage,
Probably LP. Oh yeah. There was some good stories, but Larry, he's a legend himself. So you're very rarely going to be able to pull the wool over his eyes by trying to say something the car's doing that it's not. But look,
was Larry a fiery guy? Because we're passionate as drivers.
Not with me, but definitely told me if he thought that the performance wasn't on, he for sure he'd pull me up, and I like that. I like if there's something I can do better or something I haven't done as well as I should have, then
It's always better than getting blindsided at the end of a deal as well, though.
Yeah.
It's always good to have that conversation when it's early and you can do something about it. Try and change the narrative rather than wait.
But even some of the people like Larry had in the team, like Ron Toranak was a really good mate of Larry's, a guy that built the Rolt Empire.
Yeah.
Worked with Sir Jack Brabham.
Yeah.
And Ron, in later years, once he'd sold Rolt and came back to Australia, he was involved in the team just from another perspective. He'd come away to the race meetings and just the stories that he had, like that era of Europe and Formula One from the late 60s to the late 80s, it was just incredible. Some of the things you just stand there listening for hours.
Yeah.
To what he had to say, it's really.
And the racing would have been so different then as well.
Yeah.
Dangerous and
Yep.
trialing parts and engineering and working it out on track as opposed to in sim. And
Yep.
there was a lot of things I imagine then
Yep.
that would have been different and
Sure.
scary.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just going to take a P15S quickly.
Yeah, okay. We'll pause there.
I'm going to steal another drink before we start this back up, mate. Thanks, sir. We did start this because we were always sitting, there's a pub down the road, Union House,
Yeah,
and we'd be there, and I'm like, I always wanted to do a pod, and Shane wouldn't do it because we talk about drivers getting in trouble. And he's like, I rang him, must have been last year, and I said, I really want to do this podcast, let's start Apex Hunters up again. And he was like, nah, every time I say something, I get in trouble or the headlines are negative, and it's just not. He's like, I can't do it, man. Like, you just can't do it.
Yeah.
So I was like, fine. And then Elliot and I were always at the pub talking about motorsport. And I was like, fuck, like, why don't we just start it up? Like, and that was why as well, we were like, we have a drink here. And that's why when Marketplace bought a bar, he's like, we should do it like at the bar as if we're like sitting down the pub.
That's a great idea.
And then we end up just chatting about stuff. Half problem is you get relaxed and say the wrong thing. But I'm like, it's never the wrong thing. It's just what we think.
That's right.
The broadcast stuff was funny after Sandown. That definitely changed a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, anyway,
That's what it's sort of about. Because if you got the same thing that's happening, what point are you going to make other than two blokes having a chat, but not really chatting because you're worried about something you're going to say?
Yeah.
You can't.
Well, and that was what we thought. And I was like, even the uniform, like I said if we have a driver come on, I'm like, I don't mind if you wear, like we had Cam come on, he wore the Monster hat, whatever. I'm like, that's cool. I get that. And it's, you're endorsed by them or whatever, and they help us stay employed.
Yeah.
But whenever we put a team uniform on, you are conscious of representing everyone on that.
Yep.
So even if, like, I always think like TV, we'll swear on here sometimes. And it's not an effort to do it. It's an effort not like we're not conscious.
We're now trying to think.
But at the moment a TV camera comes in front of you, you're actually conscious of if you're angry or emotional, you got to consciously not say that, which means that you're then not being yourself.
Yes.
So there's no way if I had team uniform on at any point I could say I was being myself because there's still a piece of me. It's like saying I'm unbiased. It's impossible.
Yeah.
You're always going to have some bias because we're human. So I'm like, as soon as it's serious and there's like a camera that is broadcast or something in front of me or it's owned by supercars or there's brands that don't want that kind of thing, you're like, I'm not being myself.
No, that's right. But a bit of swearing
or just saying what you think or that guy's a peanut or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
Like I said, it's always you that upsets everyone anyway.
Correct.
I wanted to quickly, before we move on though, this is kind of a personal one, but I lost my dad when I was quite young.
Yep.
Do you now, having a young bloke that races, do you think more about what you got to achieve racing with your dad, or does that ever?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yep. I didn't. I say I did appreciate it because, at the point in '96 when Dad came to drive for us at Gary Rogers, he could have driven for anyone. He actually stopped racing full time and co-driving with Scafie because he saw an opportunity that he could help a young team, right, come out. And then to come and drive with me, fantastic. At the time, though, that's not what I thought. My thinking was, right, I've got someone we can go to this race and we can actually have a crack at winning it. That was my thing. But then as the years go by and you think, and then the next year we finished second. Okay, it was a distant second, but it was second. Then it was like, yes, that's what we come to do. But now it's not that. Yep. Now it is like we're all getting older and you go, there were more than three times. There were moments in my career that I got to share with Dad. And we raced hard again. Like some of the best times at the time, they weren't the best times. They were when he dived down the inside with 2 to go at Bathurst and tore the mirror off the car, and it was full on. The first time was Adelaide 1995 Super Tourer race for the Grand Prix supports. I was in the Alpha, he was in a Mondeo, and almost for the first time ever, I've got him. Right, I'm in front, I'm leading him, and obviously there's a fair bit of pressure because he's there. And on the second last lap, I had brakes that were fading, but I've gone too deep at the hairpin, run wide, he's passed me and he's won the race. And I've, you know, and you go, oh, and at the time you're annoyed and pissed off. But, you know, holy shit, now thinking of being able to have done that and shared that with him, that's just gold. You know, it's just the best. It's sometimes it's better than the trophies. You know, it's better than the trophies that you've got is to be able to do that. And now I'm experiencing it with Clay, and he's the same as I was. He doesn't give a shit about Dad. What he cares about is how do I get to supercars? What are we going to do? How, you know, what's my next race? But we're doing it together, and I get as much competitive joy out of now working on the cars, trying to not let them break down. Make sure the performance is good for Clay. That's, you know, I would actually I'd be disappointed I'm not racing, but right now, that's me. You know, I don't mind that I'm not. You know, I'm getting out and doing some historic stuff, and that's awesome. It's not competitive, but it's good fun. But I get to use my competitive instinct with some of Clay's racing. That's cool.
I love it because, I mean, my perspective changed massively after my dad passed away because I never once thought, how cool is this? I'm going racing with my dad every week in go-karting. But then you turn up to the racetrack and, you know, Chaz's dad's there every weekend and Shane's dad's traveling to every race. And, you know, my dad never saw me race a Super 2 car or race in England or anything. You know, it was a lot. And there's a million kids like that. And that's why, you know, and it might not resonate with a lot of people, but when I saw the results with your dad, I'm like, fuck, I would love to have even taken him for a hot lap. You know, they're or even just to have seen me, you know, the Grand Prix, the only reason it meant anything to win was because I remember thinking when I crossed the line, I wouldn't have even thought of doing a burnout if I was allowed to do them. You're not allowed to at the Grand Prix, but I didn't think of anything but, you know, the time growing up racing karts and trying to get there with your family.
Yes.
And then Dad was the closest one to me, I guess, you know, being there with me through karting, not anything against my mum or anything, but it was very much me and my dad. And I look at that now and I just love, I look at it and think it's such a cool thing that you got to do. And that's why I asked. And I assumed it would have changed now because you have a son. And I knew Clay wouldn't be thinking it because I know I never did and I knew you probably wouldn't. But when you reflect back, that's got to be
absolutely
such a cool experience. That's awesome. I love that.
And it's still really cool because Clay's racing, but your daughter Priya is working in the sport, you know, doing the video stuff with media and she's camera operator and videographer and all that stuff. And then
she does a lot with supercars.
Yeah, she does. She works full time for Neil. And Airtime Media, and she's going great. You know, and that's all. We're getting pretty deep now, guys. But
I know this is actually deeper than I.
No, but I actually really.
I never talk about like that deep stuff, but I am with my dad. It's something special to me, and that's I wanted to ask you because it's such a cool thing.
It's so cool. Like some of the stuff we're doing now, you know. I think back to the decisions we made with Priya when she was horse riding. Right, so we're at home. And gave her an iPhone, right? One of our old iPhones. So she used to do her horse riding in the arena at home and set her iPhone up when she was 11, and she'd video herself to try and get better. But she's taken that's what started it.
Yeah.
You know, that's what started the interest, and just now knowing what she's doing, and okay, motorsport's a catalyst because we're involved in it, we think about it, we do it every other weekend. But now she's doing that. That to me, like you say. Yes, the driving stuff is really important and it's cool, and it's easy to say because you've got a few trophies in the cabinet, but it's the stuff now that I'm getting the best satisfaction out of. You know, it's seeing them doing what they're doing. That's really, and I couldn't care if I never drove another race as long as they were doing what they wanted to do. You know, what about you, mate? You race with Mark, your dad, and in some ways we've got a connection through that because Mark was a mechanic at BMW when my dad was driving for John Player Special. So,
wow, you never said that when we were
doing. Well, I don't really know the story so you could probably tell me stuff I don't know. But
sound check. Jump in there.
It's funny you say that because I was going to say I did some touring car masters stuff in 2010, and I was coming out of state series, and I obviously wanted to race professionally as a career or whatever, but you know, didn't know what we were going to do. I was driving a car, and it's because of you I got to Formula Ford because I remember Mum had a conversation with you at Eastern Creek at Muscle Car Masters. Your dad was racing Touring Car Masters. I actually found the photo today of us standing in pit. I got a photo with your old man Jim, and then I got a photo with you in pit lane.
Have you got it on your phone? Can I post it in this?
Yeah, I'll send
put
it through. It's pretty funny. I look horrendous. You look great. But I remember Mum at the time, once the racing sort of got serious, she sort of financially was backing me on the early days. Yep. And she said, how does he get to supercars? And you said, you want to go supercars, you got to go Formula Ford. Yep. Like, you got to do that pathway. And based off that conversation, went and got a McGale and we ran Formula Ford, and that's what then kicked me into actually doing some of the cool stuff that I've done. I didn't get to where I wanted to, but I've raced some cool cars too, and still am with the Trans Am program, and I'm having a ball doing that. Yep. So, the family thing is cool. And I've kind of got two parts of it, but through that connection, through obviously Dad knowing you guys, and so that's pretty cool. And I found those photos today. I thought,
I can't wait to see them.
Yeah, I was like, that bloody conversation, because I didn't have a great time in Formula Ford. Like, it sort of got me to go to Super 2 and all that other stuff, and it was the right decision. But for whatever reason, like, I was just too green probably at the time, and as you said, didn't know what you didn't know. And we went holus bolus. Mum went and bought the McGale from France and all that, and didn't really know who to go with, and we probably made some errors in our decisions.
It's pretty tough as a young kid to pick the right path. We've talked about it on here, and I don't know. Like, I don't know that there is a right path anymore, but like, it seems simpler at one time where it was Formula Ford, and then you got the opportunity as a co-driver. Yep. So maybe the development series then
100%. I think it was I think it was heaps easier back when I was doing it. The opportunities came from Formula Ford. That was it. Yeah. That's where, when the doors opened and people started to look for guys, that's where it come from. So that's where you went. You didn't have to go anywhere else.
I think it's a naivety of not knowing. Like, as you say, as a young kid, you're like, yep, I can go run a Formula Ford, and I've just got to be in that category, and I'll do, like, you always think you can do well. Yep. Like, you don't think about how important the team is. Yeah. The whole package is so tight. Like, everything is so important. And you see the drivers do really well, is it's a really well managed process. They don't just go, yep, that car will do because they want them. They actually go, well, hang on.
There's still, though, as well, the kids that can afford to do karting at 150 grand a year now. Yeah. Like, that has changed massively. Rocking up with your dad with a kart trailer, and you just don't see it. You go to Todd Road now, and there's transporters lined up everywhere like there is in Europe. Yep. And even now to get to F1, back in the day, it was like you could do Formula Ford and you do well, and you get a realistic opportunity to test or something out of Formula Ford. Yep. F4, I watched a pod the other day. Kids are spending €500,000 to do F4. Wow. Like, I did British Formula Ford for $120,000. Yep. And it was a massively subsidised deal, but it was like, that's, and now they're talking €2.5 million to do F3. And like, who realistically, and the problem is half the drivers, everyone looks at F1 and I know they got the profile, but eventually they're just not going to be the best of the best. The best of the best end up in IndyCar or in supercars. Like, I think we have some of the best drivers in the world doing supercars.
And for the miles that they do, the thing that impresses me about Kiwis and Aussies, you never test.
No, that's
like, compared to what they do in Europe and other parts of the world. And I think that's why we breed good drivers here, is because every time you get in K, like, this could be the last time I drive for 6 months. I've got to frigging make sure I make the most of this, Yeah. And I think that's part of it. But just one last story I've got on your dad, which is always fond with me because he's my racing hero, was when I did the TCM stuff, I did Sandown and we just built a charger. Yep. And for whatever reason, I must have gone okay at some point. Your dad and a couple of the fast guys were behind me. And I remember we're 3 wide into one, and at the time I just thought it was Kim J next to me. He was in Eddie Albaninka's car because Eddie had something going on that weekend, and he's doored me. And I'm like, and I know Kimbo really well, so I've gone down there. What are you doing? He's like, no, wasn't me. Jim was up the inside of me, and it was just like, and I was like, well, that's pretty cool then, because he had just seen this gap and gone, I'm in, and just made it work. And then Kimbo's doored me and stuff, and I was like, that's pretty funny. So even then, like, at that point, I don't know how old your dad would have been at that stage, but that would have been 2010. So, but he was still like going for every gap and racing as hard as and I just thought that is super cool. So
I don't think there's been a time, probably up until Dad's biggest problem was he hated scratch. He'd rather blow an engine up and scratch the car. So up until the point where it was becoming a situation where he's scratching the car, he was exactly like that. He knew he could race with guys, go down the inside, and it was good racing.
Yeah.
But that's the way he's always been.
Yeah. I just loved it. I thought, man,
great.
he's done so much, and then he's still just absolutely like going for every gap. And I was like, that is just the coolest thing.
I heard Scafey say on a pod the other day that I think it was a pod. He said he got out qualified by your dad when he was 50 at Bathurst.
Yeah,
in the supercar, and he was like, the guy is just like a freak.
I still remember watching those stints on. They're probably on YouTube now, or whatever it was, and I'm pretty sure he ran an open face that year too.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And he just
Did you ever run an open face?
No.
I don't know how people...
Oscar, mate. Oscar.
Did you?
Yeah, and the goggles.
That's probably the worst place to run an open face because you're going so fast.
Yeah,
all
true.
the shit going
But
on.
I just found it felt so naked. I did it once at Norwell on a ride day, and I went out and just came in, was like, no, I can't do that. Like, it just felt, I'm like, why can I see everything?
The problem I had with open faces, we used to work when I do a bit of coaching, is if there's cameras and stuff, I do like a really weird facial expressions. And I'm like, just cover that up. Like, you know, when you're concentrating face and stuff, I'm like, I hate that. So, but I remember seeing footage of, I think it was in 02 when he drove his Scaife.
Yeah,
too.
yep.
And he's got open face and he's just so cool and calm and he's just punching out these like gold laps. I'm like, this makes it look so goddamn easy.
It has been, it's been a really good chat. We've got some fan questions, which we'll roll into, I think. I think we're...
Memos?
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple, actually. The very first question we've put in some written ones as well because not everyone likes to send. We've got these, I've put the headphones on your mic there.
Oh, yep.
Some people send them in, but first we'll do some written questions. So first up, we've got actually someone asking about is Ken... I don't know why I try and read people's names. I can't read his last name.
That's
Aitchison?
small, that one. You're going the small one.
Zoom in.
There we go.
But he's asking, Ken on Facebook was asking about Clay's plans for next year, which I thought was a good question. Given we got the young bloke making his way up the ranks now, so what is in store for Clay coming up?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Definitely 86 series with Blanchards again. That worked really good for Clay this year. Come across it a bit late, so it took us a couple of rounds to get going. But then there's an opportunity. I won't say too much at the moment. It's not Super 2, but it's in another good category of motorsport.
Trans Am?
Possibility, no, but something that's quite fast. So that's looking promising. In the next week or so, we'll know a bit more about that. And we're desperately trying to do, 1 or 2 rounds to get going in Super 2 if we can. The drive of the Walkinshaw car that went well. There's the Blanchards have a Super 2 car. We don't know what they're doing with it, but it's like anything.
Fast too. Jacko just rolled that thing out,
they
dusted
did
it off, and
they did a great job with that. That was actually really good to see that they could roll in with Jack, and it gives someone confidence to go into with that car and
definitely
run Super 2. And if someone like Tim will run someone different throughout the weekend, throughout the year, it gives people an opportunity.
So the trick is though we've got to raise some dough. So that's the reality of it. Yep. But no, all exciting stuff. Regardless of whatever happens, we're out racing. That's why we do it because it's
Bloody
good fun.
do you know you would have thought about every option, but you and Clay and GD4 would be cool.
Yeah, have thought about that.
You can team up and
and it's certainly not the cars. The cars are low cost to run, but it's a high. Sounds like it's becoming a bit of a high cost championship to participate in.
Yeah.
It's anything like getting more and more competitive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Go for it, Bubs.
Brian Wilson just wants to know, would be keen to know if the 1998 Bathurst win with Jason was the most satisfying, given the Thursday dramas and the fact SBR was such a young team.
It was for sure, and for lots of reasons, and we've all we've been discussing them today. How different points of your life and different things that are going on in the circumstance, particularly at that race, depending on how your weekend rolls out. You've got good and bad memories from lots of different events. But that was incredible because for me, that race was all about the fact I'd been in the UK that year test driving with Nissan and the Super Touring program, and it's kind of been given that opportunity through Gary, who had supported the Super Touring stuff here in Australia, and we bought a Nissan that year. Cut a long story short, some of the engineers come out and they asked me to go over and participate in this test, and I got that role. So for me, it was coming back, driving that car that was a fair bit different. I'd always had a lot of respect for Ross and Jim anyway, in the way that they were going about it. They'd started their own team. The cars were always fast. Bridie that year had put it on pole a couple of times, won a race or two, got on the podium. I thought that was really good. And then when we came to the race, it all worked, even though we had such a disaster in the lead up. So, yeah, for those reasons, very satisfying. rolled the dice, did something a bit different strategy-wise, and your first is always, just to win that race. It's unreal. But the first one was unreal, really cool.
Which car was your favourite V8 supercar, and what's your favourite Bathurst memory, win or lose? It was from Castle Hill Vintage.
Actually, we were saying earlier that the latest car you drive generally is your favourite because they're the most developed.
Yeah.
But the 98 Bathurst car, that was really, really good because at the time, relative to other cars I'd driven, it was a standout. Yeah. Then there was a car that we'd built at Larry's, and that year, I think in 04 I made every shootout that they had. I made every shootout, and we had 3 poles. Wow. So that car was really cool, and it was a bit funky, and it was probably the first year that Larry had let the young engineers kind of explore some of their own thoughts on how a car could be built, and it was quite a cool car. And then the 08 car at ProDrive that I drove, that was a really good car. Same thing, good memory, just felt good.
Yep. At
the time in that era, it was sort of pretty fast everywhere we went. And then the M6 GT3, that was just the best thing. Around Bathurst, there was nothing.
I still haven't driven a GT. I would love to.
Yeah.
They just look across the top. I've been up there and watched the 12 hour when I think it was the year you were racing actually in that car. And they're so impressive.
Yep.
I remember that M6. I think in 16 when I was in the McLaren, and that was your first year in
Yes.
I remember obviously BOP wasn't kind to it, I assume.
Then it wasn't.
We got to Highlands and they obviously gave you a decent BOP. I remember just into that first 1-2 section, you'd got me in there and I was like, oh, he's got that thing worked out now and you're just gone. But
it was good. It was pretty good at Highlands.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
It was a cool car.
Good car.
Jeremy Wells wants to know, did you feel any pressure being Jim's son? And if so, was there ever a Bathurst win or point where you finally felt you had shaken that monkey off your back?
Not so much. I always just really went out every week, and it's probably a bit cliche, but I thought, Jesus, how do you as a young bloke, how can I match that? Right, I'm not even gonna try. I'll go.
Pretty close, 5 and 7.
Yeah. So I mean, initially though, it was all about just go out every weekend, try and make the car better, try and drive it better, and things start to happen. When did it probably sort of turn a bit? I think it was when I was racing against Dad in different things, in different classes, and then I felt like I was actually starting to kind of match what he was doing.
You're racing him now.
Yeah, I was racing him. I wasn't,
I can get this bloke on my day.
He wasn't backing off at the 150 board and letting me get a bit closer.
Yeah.
I think probably that. But I never ever thought, I never had a situation where I thought it was ever bad being Jim's boy, and I never had any expectation to be anything better than I was.
Did you have a bee in your bonnet to beat him when you're door to door? Like, I'm sure he probably so. Was like,
yeah. Not a bee in my bonnet, but definitely
like
there was always that, because you get close for a while. You start to get on his pace and you think, oh, here's my opportunity, right? And then it doesn't happen, or you find like the Adelaide thing. You finally get him, right? You're leading the race, you're driving away from him. He's caught up battling with Brad Jones in the Audis, and you think, this is it. And then he still gets you. Damn it.
It is funny though, because I was thinking about this today. There's been a few second generation races through the sport over the years, and I never really remember them ever mentioning it a lot. That Steve Richards, son of Jim. I never really remember it was always just Stephen Richards and Jim Richards. Where then there's some that for whatever reason it just seems like they always get brought up, but I never really remember that from watching the telecasts and stuff, or that. Obviously everyone knew that you were Jim's son, but it's not like it was brought up in every press release or every time they spoke about you on TV.
Yeah. I didn't think so. I completely agree. Like,
I don't know why, but
I grew up following supercars. Similar time to you then. Like, obviously we're the same age, and I was always Stephen Richards. Like, it was never Yeah, I don't know. It was just Jim and Steve Richards. Like as a kid growing up watching supercars, that's what it was. It was never. But then I was younger. I think what you're probably fighting against is the older guys that watch Jim going, oh, let's see what Steve's up to. It's like,
yeah, maybe, but
always,
yeah,
but then
but it's
for
never,
us,
yeah,
you know, you're when I'm growing up, like 97, I started karting. So when I've watched my first Bathurst, you've won 98. Yep. It's like, so the first person I know of that's the best in supercars is Steve Richards. Jason. They're the guns, you know, like, so it probably was different for us where,
yes,
when you look back, it's probably important for like people that do have dads that have done it. You're only maybe proving a point to the older guys that might have followed your dad.
Probably. Yeah, I think you're right.
The next generation, you're out there doing your own thing and you're influencing people like myself that's 8 years old sitting there watching the Bathurst 1000 for the first time.
But I've just noticed even with Clay, like he's obviously his own driver and his own man, but they just don't, they don't overdo it with that stuff, which I think is good because it gives him the ability to be his own identity.
And Clay has expressed in the past that he does feel it a bit, you know, he sort of, and half the battle with Clay is just saying, don't just, you know, just go and do your thing. Don't worry about any of that. That doesn't matter. None of that matters. Just go and have a good time. Do your best.
It's so hard not to, though, I imagine. Awesome. I could only imagine that. My dad used to just drive on the road quite fast. I never experienced him as a great race car driver.
All right. So we'll tuck into our fan favourites, which is the memo. So we get people I know you watch every show, Richard.
I've watched a few. I haven't watched all of them.
We get the voice memos come through with some questions, and some of them are pretty fun and out there.
Let's roll through for the first
what I'm in for.
Hey boys, great podcast. Question for Richo. Hey Richo, did you cop much shit at school when your old man was up on the podium and said you're all a pack of arseholes?
How old were you firstly when that happened?
I was 18. I was there. I was in. Was it? Hang on, 92. Yeah, no, I was 20, and I was in the garage, so I was sort of hanging around a bit that whole day, and a lot had gone on that day. A lot had gone on. Like Denny Holm had passed away. He was a really good friend of the family. He used to come and stay at our place when he'd come over from NZ with his family, and that maybe Dad says no, but I don't know how you could not. And I remember when Dad was out of the car when that happened, and he came up to me and he said, "I think Denny's passed away." You know, so did that have an effect? I don't know. Like you and I don't know if that happened during a race for us. Would it have an effect? We just get in, but yeah, something that day was a bit out of character. But no, not in terms of stuff that Dad had sort of done. Didn't really have an effect on me. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean,
it's iconic. We talk about drivers showing emotion. Like, I love it.
I love it for that. And then obviously there's potentially a sadder reason behind it to why it all went down. But I still, for him to speak his mind, what he was feeling at the time, I think is shows he's human.
Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. It shows you're human. Like that's part of it as well, that not everyone knows what's going on.
Oh, I remember the disappointment. Like when he so, you know, the rain's come down, he's crashed the car. He's been picked up by the medical car or whatever, driven back to the pits. And I remember when he walked in, he was just absolutely devastated that he had done it, you know, that he's whacked the wall, they're leading the race. He was just, and then Scafey comes up behind him, taps him on the shoulder and goes, "We won it." And Dad went, "What? I crashed the car." No, red flag, going back a lap. We won it. We won the race. And there was like that. That's a memory that sticks with me. Just where the whole team are down like this, and that turned, and it was just everyone was up and about. It was really good, really cool.
The going back a lap's not unusual either.
No. Well, Dick won it in. When was the big crash up the top of the mountain? Remember that? 81, I think. 81 or 82. 81 or 82. There's a big crash at the top that stopped the race. And they took it back lap, and Dick was leading, and he won the race.
Yeah.
So it's happened before.
It happens.
But
well, it's the red flag rule, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's funny too, though, because it goes both ways with fans and drivers. We want to see personalities from both ends.
Yep.
We have a pretty strict policy. It's like I started in Twitch when I was on the live stream. It's like, don't shit can a driver personally or anything because I just don't care. And because we're all going to be one-eyed supporters of something.
Yeah, that's right.
But we also want to see the passion from the fans and equally the drivers. So like each of us should have freedom to express ourselves. And I think that when you see fans like booing, I'm not a fan of, but when they're chanting for someone that's not you or whatever, that's fine. I'm like, whatever, I get
absolutely.
that, you know. And even when I've gone up to the top of the mountain sometimes, especially when I was at Walkinshaw, you'd get guys call out and call you a dickhead and go forward as you walk past or whatever it might be. And I actually loved that because I felt like that's
right.
Yeah, that's your opinion, Elliot. No one else shares that one. But I actually think I like seeing the passion because I'm like, oh, cool, we're doing something right. Like I thought it was cool. Yeah. And I think that when the drivers speak out, anyone listening should give us the freedom to do it without making a personal attack. You can think what you want, but I reckon it'd be good to see drivers do that more.
For sure.
That weekend was a big one though, because we actually posted. You said how you loved it, and when we put it on social, someone did mention the Denny Hulme thing as well.
Yeah, right.
There's always more. There's always more to the story, but at the end of the day, we're just people that drive cars.
Yep.
G'day everyone, Huey here.
Okay, Huey.
Big fan of the show. You guys are doing a great job there at the Apex Hunters. Now, Richo, very, very important question I'm sure everyone wants to know. For how many years after the infamous old man calling everyone a pack of assholes did you get away with swearing in the household before finally enough was enough? How long?
Actually, that's a different one, but I didn't realise that you're did you say 18 or 19?
Yeah, 20.
Yeah,
20.
so I'm sure at 20 you're probably...
You're already swearing.
Yeah.
You weren't getting sent to your room.
Maybe everyone thinks you were younger at the time.
Obviously, you've aged well then, mate. They think you're younger than what you are.
Yeah, I'm not complaining. No, it's not what Ange says.
All right, we'll roll in the next one because I think you're at 20 you're allowed to swear.
Yeah.
Richo, you legend. Hey, it's Jade in the Motorsport Kiwi here. I just wanted to ask, mate, you've obviously had the pleasure over the years to team up with some absolute legends at Bathurst, including your old man, Jimmy. I just wanted to see who was your favourite experience to team up with other than the old man? You've teamed up with Murph, Engel, Lounsey, like the list goes on, mate. You've had the pleasure of teaming up with some pretty iconic people. What was the best experience for you? Who did you enjoy kind of driving with the most without kind of dobbing in the other ones? I'd love to find out, who your favourite was, and obviously, I also wanted to ask, would you think about coming back if Clay got the opportunity to have a steer, do another father-son thing? Would you be keen on that, mate? I'd love to see it. I just wanted to say great job on the podcast, guys. Loving every moment of it, and keep up the good work. Thanks.
Thanks, sir.
Excellent. That's good question. Again, like it would be easy to say Lounsey, Frosty, and look, I haven't had a bad teammate to be honest, but one of the guys, and it wasn't at Bathurst, it was at Sandown, and we split the cars in 07, and I got to drive with Owen Kelly.
Yeah,
right? And Owen is one of the best blokes. Like he is dead set. If there's a motorsport fan around, it's Owen, and just that whole weekend, and even at Bathurst, Frosty and I were driving together, and Owen and Matt Halliday were in the other car.
Yeah.
And it's just great fun. I think we all shared the house together, and that was ripper. So we got, I think in 07 at Sandown 500, we got Owen and I finished third. And that's one of the highlights. Just it's a people sport, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, some of the people that you meet, you might cross paths with them for 30 minutes at a race meeting every 3 months. But some of those people are some of the best people that you get to know. And for me, motorsport's about that getting a result and not having that, it wouldn't be the same. So look, there's the obvious ones, but definitely that time with Owen, we're still mates now. He's a ripper.
Yeah.
It is, and even when you have a bad year, sometimes it's the relationships that get you through the bad years.
Yep. But Nathan Pretty.
Yeah.
He's a good mate of Elliot's as well.
He's a ripper.
He's a great.
There's some people like Matt Halliday. It's funny you mention him. It's actually been cool tonight. You've mentioned some of the T8 stuff, which is very familiar to me.
Yep.
Matt Halliday's another one. 2013 was like the worst year. It's Bathurst 1000. We finished well, but it was a tough weekend. Yep. And I remember all weekend, Matt Halliday we were sharing a house with. And you're right, it's one of the most enjoyable 1000s I've had from that perspective. And when you're going through practice and things aren't going right, you'd go home and laugh and have a good time and rock up the track the next day. And you realize I'm still driving race cars. I'm hanging out with mates actually and having a good time. And he's someone, same as you with Owen, probably Nathan Matt's a guy. If I bumped into him now, it'd be, we'd be ripping shit out of each other straight away, like taking the piss.
Unreal. And just on that, I mean, there's
two questions.
Clay, driving with Clay, I don't think it's ever possible to drive at 1,000, but one day it'd be nice to drive something with him. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I'd like to have that shared experience that I shared with Dad. Yeah.
Was there, when you stepped away from full time, because I actually had it in the notes as well, you podiumed your last event. I guess now I'm not racing full time. You can say things that don't just come across bias, or you got your own interests at heart, but there are good cars and there's bad cars, and sometimes your career might wrap up when you think it shouldn't. To podium in your last event shows you can still do it. Was there a point where you were finishing up your full-time career where you wanted to keep going, or did you feel like
for sure? I was still, I was struggling to try and get something out. It's weird. The last 2 years, I say this, in 2008 at the last round at Oran Park, for the last race I was on the second row of the grid and led. Okay, I jumped the start, but I still led, right?
That counts in my book.
The light came on, I went.
Yeah.
But anyway.
The next year, all of a sudden, I couldn't qualify in the top 10, right? And then that just didn't get. So we went from BF Falcon to FG. So it was the first era of the new car. Yeah. There were some regulation changes that definitely affected how our cars were built. But anyway, I had a horrible time in 2009. You start doubting the way you prep.
Yep.
You start doubting the things that you've done through your career that have been your success measures. The way you go about things. I started to change those. Maybe it was that. Maybe it was this. Maybe it was that. Anyway, midway through 2010, we just changed chassis. Right, changed chassis, and all of a sudden, the results turned. But the damage was done. Like I'd already heard in 2009, Leroy was going to replace me before the end of the year, and like there was all this stuff coming out. And I'm thinking, I probably wasn't getting on with my engineer as well because he was busy in the team doing the things that he had to do. There were lots of things that added up, but for sure, I definitely didn't want to finish. Thought I had a lot more to finish off with. And then when we changed the chassis, we started qualifying in the top 5 and got to the Gold Coast and qualified in the front row race. Led the first of the international races. I was teamed up with Will Power. We led the opening stint of that.
Yeah.
Last race, didn't qualify well, but still managed to come through and get a result. Yeah, it was shit actually. I wasn't ready for that. You never are. There's every driver out there that says they weren't ready for the end of their full-time gig, and then in the end, the performances were probably, and I'd spoken to a number of teams, the performances through that 2009-10 period weren't really good enough that even though the results at the back end of 10 were good, probably didn't install much confidence in people that you were talking to about whether you could turn it around. So anyway, we all say there's no regrets. Yeah, I would have loved to have continued on to 11 and 12 because in a different environment, in a different situation, it could have been different. It wasn't. I ended up co-driving with FPR. We won another Bathurst.
Yeah.
No complaints.
We looked at it. We started a Who Forgot, Who Remembered segment on our show as after the races it would be. And the reason we started it was because I think people needed to understand that sometimes drivers don't just forget. Like I hate when someone says he should just retire and it's like Frosty. He's still a great driver. And what he achieved at Team 18 is not indicative of his talent and his ability. you roll out it. That's why I wanted to talk about the question, because not to get too deep on the pod like we have already, but
This is going to be a very different pod.
Oh,
it's
I
good.
thought we were going to get the tissues out at one point. We're bringing up family and stuff. It's very cute.
Yeah, I'm a very emotional person. If anyone hasn't noticed, it goes both ways, anger and
Yeah. There's no in between. It's either you're raging or you're crying.
yeah.
Makes going to the pub interesting.
Yeah, I don't get punchy though, which is good.
That's true.
I'm not a rum drinker, but fuck, what are we talking about? But yeah, the Who Forgot Who Remembered was kind of founded because drivers, I don't think, just forget. Like, I think that, of course, there's a point where you get older and things might drop away, but Alonso is a great example in a car that is, electronic. You're changing things on the dash, and it's a young man's game more than it's ever been. And he can still, if the car is fast, qualify and race well. Supercars is a much more layman's term of that. Like, you can, if you've got racing ability and you can drive a race car, you can drive a supercar still.
Yep.
Because it's not a computer game. Like, we're not racing a simulator. It is, you still feel like the Gen 3 car's fantastic for that.
But hey, just on that, bring back the adjustable ARBs.
Oh,
Yeah.
Please.
agree.
Please.
Yeah.
I know.
Give the guys something to tune when the car's no good. Sorry.
I no, 100% agree.
that's-
We've talked about that as well. I'm like, I hate when you roll out of the garage, because this is the Who Remembered Who Forgot comes up in that. You can't tune the car anymore.
No.
If you roll out and your engineer's got it wrong, you're nowhere. Like, if you qualify nowhere, you're typically nowhere in the race if you roll out with the car it's still not there. Whereas sometimes, like even in the race at Bathurst, and this is where the debrief was great with T8, I was like, if we had the adjustable roll bars, probably would have tried the other way.
Yep.
Not going to say what it was, but if I had it in the car where I could have grabbed it, and then we'd have that answer.
Yep.
And there's still a level of skill in drivers where you're going to play with those adjustments and find something. But at the moment, you roll out of the garage and what you got is what you got. The cars are very similar. They're all controlled.
Yep.
But the car is a huge component. And I think that when you get to whether you're young and it ends up, like I'm only 34, but you're right. Like even my results, I look at it and it's like, well, hard to go to a team and say, I want to continue on when there's a 18-year-old who's going to cost nothing or bring money.
Yep.
And then I'm going, well, I can't steer a shitbox to the front. So what's to say I'm going to be any better than the young kid coming in?
Yep.
It's difficult. It becomes a hard sell, but it was an interesting one because I did think about that, because the podium at your last race and PD was another one. I'm sure he was different where he chose, but I remember Sandown, like that year he was retiring. He was so fast.
Yeah.
And I always think that now. I look back and it's like sometimes when you got the car, everyone says, fuck, he's just remembered how to do it. And they start talking about how good he is again.
This guy's not shit anymore.
Yeah.
But he was always good.
It's just tough because we're not runners. It's not about,
that's right.
We've got a lot of people
Yep.
and mechanical components that contribute to the speed. But anyway, Who Remembered Who Forgot's a good segment. It's been fun.
Yeah, hey Steve, Cullis here, mate. Hey, you got a good track record up at Bathurst. Just curious, any good Biffo moments? I'd love to hear.
Biffo.
I struggled to. I'm glad you made that one out.
I don't know what
I
he was
struggled with that
doing,
one.
but
You've had great Bathurst moments, good Biffo moments. Was it at Bathurst?
Biffo, I haven't really crashed much there. You mean Biffo on track with other competitors, or?
I think I'm taking it as he means Biffo with other competitors. Maybe
Right, okay.
we know you.
Rick Kelly was a good one. You grabbed him.
Yeah, Rick.
Did you have any big rivalries? I actually had it, but then we kind of talked on it. Did you have anyone that you, throughout your career, you're like, I just want to beat that guy. I got to beat that guy first.
No, not really.
No.
Not really.
You're a lover, not a fighter, Richo.
Yeah.
That's you, Elliot.
No, I don't know. I don't know. Like guys that were always tough to get around, like good races, always a good race with Garth.
Yeah.
I reckon Garth as well.
Yep. Murph, Frosty was really hard competitor, and he was a teammate, but so you don't really count that. But the year with Russell, so 2002 when I joined Larry, Russell was on the way out. He was going to Stone Brothers, but Larry ran 3 cars. So it was Larry's last year. I'd come to the team, and Russell was leaving at the end of 2002. There's a couple of times because Russell and Larry weren't getting on at that point, and Russell was always hard. Like there's times that Russell was behind me and he'd just biff me out of the way and send me wide because he didn't care anymore. And there are a few little discussions in the truck after those races. But Russell and I got on good. We were really good mates there for a long time. No, I didn't really have a set to on anyone really.
It's hard in our championship, isn't it? Because everyone's so
Yeah.
competitive.
Yeah.
You actually, like, everyone that you race.
Yep.
Garth stands out to me because he was quite a smart racer. Like, he seemed to check you up at the right point.
Yep.
And, like, he was hard to pass.
Yep.
Todd or Rick were probably pretty hard racers.
Todd was always hard. He was a hard guy to get past, and he wouldn't give you any measure. But once you if you got the gap, it was always respectful. Whereas I know I love Bargs, but I'd never try and go around the outside of Bargs.
Just open the wheel up and send you off.
I could imagine he would have been a hard ass racer.
Yeah.
Like, he would have opened the wheel up in the middle of the corner.
Yeah. But but I tell you what, one thing I always did, if I felt I was hard done by on the track, regardless, I'd go into the garage and see. I'd see someone. Like,
I think that's such a good thing.
Straight up, whether it was me cocking someone's race or. And they're always hard because you got to walk into the team, and everyone's around.
Like what Randall did at Simmons.
You got to do it though, don't you? You got to swallow your. I reckon that's you touched on it earlier too. With back in the day, you'd get like what you did with Rick. You'd go have an argument, whatever, but then on the Sunday you'd be having a beer together.
Yeah, no problem.
I found now with the younger guys that I'm racing, they'll turn you or something. They won't come and see you.
Yeah,
they won't apologise, and then it actually makes it worse.
Yep.
Because you're like that little prick hasn't come and said anything. He's just destroyed my race.
Yeah.
Won't even come and say sorry, mate. And I think it's one thing I'm big on. If I stuff up, I'll go down and say sorry, stuffed up, or vice versa. Someone opens a wheel on me or something, I'll go tell them how I feel.
Yep.
Even when you don't mean it, just go say sorry. And
no, that's right.
They're kind of confused.
Yeah. There was a ripper one with Scaife in it. It was a warm up at Winton. It was in the wet, right? And I was in front of Scaife. I think I can't remember if it was FPR or Larry's. And anyway, Scaife is locked to front and just taken me off the road, right? And I'm pretty upset about it. and this is typical of Scaife. What a good bloke he is. I go down there. I march into the garage. I see him there. And I go, what was that about? He just took me off the road. And he turns around and he goes, yeah, Richo, I fucked up. That was it. Oh, okay. So you turn around, tail drag between your legs and walk out.
Copy. Thanks,
waiting for the big reason, and it was nothing. It's just a mistake.
Just fucked up.
That's the worst. See, I'm quite fiery. I'd be like, fuck, give me something. Like, you want that. You almost need to vent.
Yeah, you're like, I want to have an argument.
Yeah, that's right.
I've come
just tell me you made a mistake.
Come down here for an argument with you, Scafey.
Bullshit me a little bit so I can yell at you some more. That's funny.
Let's try the next one.
Hi, Paul from Montrose.
Yeah, Paul.
What's it like, Steve, living with a legend of a father you have as in Jim? One of the best drivers we have ever seen in motorsport.
Yeah, look, Paul, it's awesome. But at the end of the day, his dad, that all the other stuff is really cool, and we reflect a lot on it now that he's not racing. But he for sure, everything that I did in motor racing, I would have modelled off Dad. There's no doubt about that, and I'm the first to admit. But I think it's different when you're in the environment of the family household. Yep, he's done a lot, unreal. But at the end of the day, he was Dad. Still the guy that when I played up, got the belt out. Laid in.
It's like part of the pod. The more conversations you have, it's giving people the perspective to say, like, you grow up as a kid that just drives cars. Your dad would have been that at some point. You're then that. Clay's that now. Like, it's still just humans that drive cars.
I mean, the classic is Dad owned a couple of at different points Bob Jane T-Marts, right? And as to get the money to go kart racing, when I was 15, I used to work there on a Saturday morning and on school holidays and all that sort of thing. And if I wasn't working hard enough, he let me know about it.
Yeah.
If I wasn't putting in, he let me know. So that's, that's reality. Your daily life is not, as much as I admire everything he's done, he was still the guy that was belting me up if I wasn't doing the right job.
Good on him.
In a good way. I don't mean he was belting me up.
It's okay. We're not. You don't need to worry about that here.
There's bigger fish to fry here. Scott's getting sued all the time.
Hey, legends. Loving the show. Doing an awesome job. Can't wait to see what you got in 2025. just the question that I got for the big man. Out of all your Bathurst wins, which one was your most memorable? Which one was the hardest? And which one would you change to do it differently? Thanks again, guys. Enjoy.
The gear?
Yeah, the gear was the one I'd do differently. 02.
Sorry.
The best, either the first or the last for those reasons. The hardest was 13, and in some ways it could be considered the best. In 13, they had this thing they used to do for the Friday Night Live thing, and it was a dad and son thing, and there was Chaz and Eddie, Dick and Steve, and me and Dad, and we had to do this thing. We had to set up a tent, right, and then pack a tent down. So we've done this. Part of the thing was you had to dive into the tent before
I think I
coming.
watched this, yeah.
I've dived into the tent and I've done my back. Like not done my back, like serious, to the point where I was racing the Porsche Carrera Cup that weekend as well as driving the supercar with Frosty. And thankfully, the only place it was bearable was actually sitting. That was the only place that you could do it. Other than that, I was hanging upside down in the truck with, I think, Phil was the physio at DJ's at the time. Phil Young. He had a thing, like I'm in between practice sessions, I'm hanging upside down and I've always had a bit of a lower back drama. And I actually thought so that was Friday night. On the Saturday morning, it was starting to flare up, and I thought, is there someone that could potentially if I try and do this and I do a shit job, then I'm letting everyone down. Am I better off just going in and saying to Tim? Anyway, so I didn't do that. Everyone knew what was going on, having lots of physio, but thankfully, being in the car was actually acceptable, and did a reasonable job, right? And we won the race. But that was the toughest by a long way. No
one would ever know that either.
On the Monday morning, we were going back to the track to do the sunrise thing, and I sneezed, and it just about put me unconscious. It was that bad. It was that bad. Yeah. So it had got better through the race, just through physio and warming up. It had actually got a bit better. But if you ever bother watching, if you look at our driver changes, they were you'll see it's not. Frosty is pulling me out. He's pulling me out.
You might have to cut one of them up, mate.
Yeah, I'll find that. That's crazy. Yeah, and driver changes are not easy.
No, that was bad. But I held up my end of the bargain anyway.
And you won.
Sound check. We're nearly done here. No pressure. I'm just wrapping this up. I just needed another one to finish the pod there, but that was the end of the fan memos.
That was it?
That was the last one I'd put in there for tonight's, mate. It's been... Made it. You made it through. There's been...
One last question. No.
Yeah. No, it's been unreal, honestly. And you do have one of the most impressive supercar careers. When you said you'd come on, I was very stoked because I got to work with you briefly when you were at Team 18, and outside the Grand Prix for me with the special moment with my dad in my mind, but the Bathurst 1000 finishing second to you and Craig is the biggest highlight of my career.
Oh, that's cool, mate. That's awesome.
And most special memories, standing beside you two while I heard the crowd chanting your names. It's just like moments you dream of growing up. So very special to have a beer with you at the pod and share the bar with you and Barbs.
Hey, and thanks for inviting me because it's cool what you're doing. You bring a different perspective to the sport. It's great. Awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's good to get you on. From my point of view, mate, I've always admired, obviously, Dad's group, more so yours as well. So, and there's a couple of connections there.
Yeah.
I was actually chatting to Georgie Medicki this morning. He goes, that's how we got in a dirt bike ride. You remember that? Because he bought your old Husselberg show bike.
Yeah.
And I said, shit, that's right. And then because of your connection at KDM, I then got my Kato, which I've still got. And so there's some connections there. It's really cool. Good. So thanks for coming on.
Right. Even Andrew, I think, came third to you at Bathurst once. You came second the year your dad won. Andrew Medicki came third, I believe. I was looking at it today and I said to Elliot, I'm like, holy shit.
With Larko.
Small world. Yeah, that's it.
With Larko.
Yeah.
It's a small world.
Unreal.
No, I appreciate it, mate. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And all the best with Clay's career too, mate.
Thanks. Yeah. It's good. Good fun. Having a ball. Life's good.
Awesome.